You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
Oh, this blood's scaring the shit out of me, Larry.
They call it a Royale with cheese.
Our fun is so much fun. All the shooting. I love that stuff, you know, the killing.
A lot of killing.
Oh, that's an old trick.
If you truly love cinema, you can't help but make a good movie.
Which brings me to me.
Music time's over.
K. Billy's super sounds of the 70s weekend just keeps on coming.
The year was 1962, Knoxville, Tennessee. The talented 15-year-old Connie McHugh finishes school early and gets a job as a nurse at the local hospital. One day after work, she meets a charming actor and musician named Tony Tarantino. After a few months, they get married, and a few months after that, they split. As a parting gift, Tony leaves his ex-wife a surprise, a little of his DNA, which 9 months later receives a name.
I found out I was pregnant after we split, but never tried to get in contact with him.
Gunsmoke, starring James Arness.
During her pregnancy, Connie watched the TV show Gunsmoke, where the enchanting Burt Reynolds played the role of Quint Asper. The young girl was enamored with the character and decided to name her future child after him.
But I wanted a more formal name than Quint. And then I was reading a Faulkner book, The Sound and the Fury. The heroine's name was Quentin, so I decided that my child was going to be named Quentin, whether it was male or female. I was also looking for a limited number of nicknames. The shortest would be Quent, which I promptly shortened for Q, the name by which most of his friends refer to him.
Connie married again when Q turned 2. She chose a musician named Kurt Zastapil. Kurt gave Quentin his last name and adopted him. The family moved to Los Angeles, where Quentin's mother began a successful career in pharmacology. Her career began to take off, and they settled in South Bay, one of the nicest neighborhoods of the city. His mother's love for television and the cinema seemed to genetically pass down to Quentin. He began to go to the movies before he could walk. He was barely 5 when his mother would take him to movies like Carnal Knowledge and Deliverance.
You better run, you son of a bitch!
While his peers were watching things like Dumbo and The Jungle Book, he was enjoying The Wild Bunch and Midnight Cowboy.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
The child became consumed with films. He rehearsed scenes from them with his toys and often pretended to be the hero from various movies. This obsession was of no help at school, and though his IQ was a school record-breaking $160, it didn't seem to reflect in his grades. Teachers recognized his talent, but he was terrible at writing and math. In addition, he was so restless and disobedient that the school psychologist tried to convince Connie to start giving him sedatives, but she refused to do that. The boy couldn't tell the time, ride a bike, or swim, but he could describe every film that he had ever seen, say which actors were in them, who directed it, and dreamed only of becoming an actor. As the years passed, nothing changed, and at 16, he dropped out of school with his mother's blessing.
I could send him off every day and have him hanging out on street corners, or I could let him quit. And I thought I'd actually have more control over him if I let him stay at home. I wanted him to see that life without an education would not be a picnic.
But a picnic it was. Having reverted to his birth father's last name, which was more compatible with a Hollywood career, he easily found work in the film industry. At first, he became a cashier in an adult movie theater. However, the dream of many teens in the 70s didn't resonate with him. He loved real films and considered pornos to be cheap, disgusting, and boring.
Who the hell are you? What are you doing here?
He spent his salary on acting classes. Q attended James Best Group, an actor who rose to fame thanks to the movies Shock Corridor and Verboten. Best method was simple. He wasn't producing the next Sophia Loren or Marlon Brando. He was getting his students ready for regular roles on TV. So the most important thing he taught was how to behave naturally on camera.
You gotta be a great actor. You gotta be naturalistic. You gotta be naturalistic as hell.
After finishing the class, he created his first acting resume, which was basically a few lines of bald-faced lies. For example, he had written that he had played in George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. This movie was chosen on purpose, because at the time it was impossible to double-check. It was 1983. Quentin was already 20 years old, but his career stubbornly refused to take off. He had no idea then that a random visit to a rental store called Video Archives would cause his life to turn upside down.
He came by as a film buff one day and we started talking about movies. Got into a discussion about Brian De Palma. 4 hours later, we were still talking. He came back the next day and talked about Sergio Leone. Eventually, I offered him a job, working for $4 an hour with permission to sign out as many videos as he liked, free of charge.
You got a boss, right?
Yeah.
Hey, what's his name?
Lance.
That's him.
Until I became a director. It was the best job I ever had.
The store made up for any film education that Quentin might have missed. Every day it was filled with heated, 8-hour discussions about film. Each participant was constantly digging through the collection of 9,000 tapes in order to find just the right film and prove their case. This was not the place where the customer was always right. In fact, just the opposite. You could get insulted if you didn't appreciate Scorsese, or if you never heard of Francois Truffaut. If you came intending to get Hercules in New York, Tarantino would force you to get Blowout, and instead of playing Disney cartoons or the latest Schwarzenegger film, the store played pictures of Goodart and John Woo. The rundown rental store became a haven for all the cinephiles of Los Angeles, where young Quentin amazed the regulars with his phenomenal memory.
I always prided myself on my cinema knowledge. Who directed what? Who starred in it?
And Quentin would go on to tell you who the supporting cast was, who the DP was, who wrote the screenplay, and probably...
Thanks to these circumstances, a small group of like-minded companions formed around Quentin. Roger Avery, a young director working at Video Archives. Craig Hammond, whom Quentin befriended while attending James Best acting classes. And Rand Vossler, who was a beginning screenwriter and director and often visited the rental store. In those days, Craig Hammond and Tarantino were like brothers, spending all their free time together. They studied every Italian and Chinese film they could get their hands on. Hammond suggested they combine their powers and write a screenplay together, which led to My Best Friend's Birthday.
Mean, nasty, rude. I mean, he couldn't give a fuck about anything except rocking and rolling, live fast, die young, and have a good-looking corpse.
I got something for you. Jesus Christ. Do I get anything in my nose? Not right here. Okay, cool. Okay, here we go. Ready? Yeah. It's K-Billy, and we're back on the air.
The friends invested all their money in the creation of this picture. Still, the budget was so small that Tarantino made up for any lacking actors, and they filmed at his mom's house and a friend's bar. The shooting team was made up of 3 people. Quentin, the director, the administrator Roger Avery, and the cameraman Rand Vossler. The friends threw all their energy into the production, hoping this movie would help them get a little attention and further their careers. But the film was never finished. The laboratory where the film was being stored had a fire that destroyed the majority of the footage. However, it was obvious from the few fragments that were saved that Tarantino's signature style had already begun to develop.
So you don't know Eddie. He is really strong and really mean.
Kill something!
I'm really jealous.
Freeze, Packer!
And I'm very pissed, all right?
The main source of this style was his own personality. Q always wore black, ate hamburgers, read comics, and drove an old Honda Civic. His phenomenal memory helped him find inspiration for dialogues just by overhearing conversations.
Quentin has a mind for a dialogue. He can repeat a conversation you've had 10 or 15 years ago verbatim.
One of the best places for gathering information was prison, where Quentin ended up 3 times. Each time, it was because of unpaid parking tickets. he was so distracted that he was fined $3,000 in parking tickets alone.
He's in county unexpectedly.
What for?
His traffic ticket's gone warrant. They stopped him for something, found warrants on him in the county.
In 1984, Hammond introduced Tarantino to beginning producer Kathryn James. She helped the young talent, who only had a short and falsified resume under his belt, to get at least some kind of work in cinema. 10 years later, James helped produce Pulp Fiction. But back then, she was only able to help him get a cameo role in Golden Girls, where he played an Elvis impersonator. This episode was later included in a clip of the show's best moments and was often played on TV, thanks to which Quentin received royalties every time it was aired. At the same time, Roger Avery gave Quentin his script to read. Open Road was about a couple in love who ended up on the wrong side of the law. Q liked it, and he spent a lot of time convincing Avery to finish it. Roger was always busy and clearly burned out, so he asked Quentin to do it himself. He agreed and took the task very seriously. He got so into it that he quit his job at Video Archives and moved back in with his mother. However, in order to pay his parking fines, he got a job as a traveling salesman at Imperial Entertainment. His job was to sell cassettes to stores, like the one he worked for before. In a few months, there was almost nothing left of the original Open Road, and Avery's draft was used to create 2 screenplays, True Romance and Natural Born Killers. He finished True Romance first and decided to make the film himself, since his acting career didn't seem to be going anywhere. And the only way to get a part in a movie was to make it himself.
You know, it's not right. It's not right, and it's not fucking fair.
Natural Born Killers was written with one goal in mind: sell the script and use the money to shoot True Romance. Unfortunately, nobody wanted anything to do with either of the scripts. Quentin didn't give up and decided to rework an old idea about the robbery of a jewelry store. Having completely devoted himself to his new work, Quentin first gave the rights to Natural Born Killers to Rand Vossler, who had helped him make My Best Friend's Birthday, and later, thanks to Kathryn James, sold True Romance to the American Screen Actors Guild for the minimum amount allowed, $30,000. As 1989 unfolded, he had money and was working on a new screenplay called Reservoir Dogs. In order to avoid the same fate as his last projects, he decided not to spend the money and set aside the money for shooting. Thanks to his first official sale, you could say that Tarantino became a professional screenwriter in the eyes of Hollywood, which led to his first gig. Special effects expert Robert Kurtzman hired him to rewrite his script about vampires. He offered him $1,500 and promised to help with special effects on any of Quentin's future projects. Tarantino agreed and rewrote the whole thing. That is how From Dusk Till Dawn came into being. But Kurtzman was unable to shoot it. At one point, Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger, showed interest, but later changed his mind. This became Quentin's third project, which was resigned to gather dust on the shelf. When he received his next job, Quentin quit his salesman's job. For his work editing the dialogues in Past Midnight, starring Rutger Hauer as the lead, he was paid $8,000, though we wouldn't call it editing exactly.
They hired me to do a dialogue polish, all right? And it became like a page 1 rewrite. And then by the time they made the movie, it became half my rewrite and half of the original script.
Maybe you're giving him too much credit. Maybe Jordan just isn't a natural born killer.
Thanks to After Midnight, Quentin's name appeared in the credits for the first time. About that time, Q befriended Scott Spiegel, co-author of the movie Evil Dead 2. They met totally randomly when they struck up a conversation in line at a movie theater. Spiegel was impressed by Quentin's erudition and invited him to party at his house. When Scott heard the name Tarantino, he remembered another person with that same last name, whose script True Romance he had recently read. When Quentin told him it was his work, Spiegel was amazed and promised him that no matter what, he would help him make a movie. The next day, he convinced Lawrence Bender, the producer of his latest film, to work with Tarantino. That meeting became a turning point for both their careers. Tarantino worked with Lawrence as a producer for the next 19 years.
There's another asshole, my producer, right next to him, man. Tapping his fucking watch.
Bender immediately advised Quentin to focus on making Reservoir Dogs. Tarantino finished the script in just 3 weeks and wanted to start shooting right away, using the money from True Romance and his friends as actors. But Bender asked Quentin for 1 year to seek financing worthy of a professional movie.
What happened was, I told Lawrence, all right, look, I'm going to be writing this film. I'm going to start with it next month, and I'm going to be finished with it in a few days. All right, so I write it and finish it, and I show it to him, and he goes, this is pretty good. Why don't we try to get this going as a real movie? All right, no, I've heard that all before. Forget it. I don't trust that. I'd spent 6 years trying to get deals on films. No one was going to give me a job to make a new movie. All right, no one was going to take a chance and go, here's $1 million. And so I took my destiny out of their hands. I had written 2 other scripts before that I thought I was going to make. But this one, as I'm writing it, I knew I was going to shoot a film on it. This was the one. This was achievable.
In the end, their contract was written down on a bar napkin and stated that Quentin give Bender 2 months to look for money. But within the week, events began to unfold with incredible speed. Lawrence was a longtime student of Peter Floyd's acting school, to whom he showed the Reservoir Dogs script. Floyd jokingly asked for all the actors on the planet who Bender would choose for the main role. He answered that the role would be perfect for Harvey Keitel. But here the jokes ended, because it turned out Floyd's wife was a friend of Keitel and could send him the script anytime. In just a few days, Bender got a message on his voicemail saying that Harvey not only loved the script, he said that he must play the main role, but also promised to do everything to make sure that the project received a budget and support from the studio. With Keitel, Reservoir Dogs underwent a Cinderella transformation. After a month of talks, the budget of the picture went from Quentin's saved $30,000 to $1.5 million from the company Live Entertainment.
Looks nice.
Throughout his career, Harvey Keitel tried to trust amateur directors. He did so with Martin Scorsese first in Mean Streets and later in Taxi Driver, 2 films which paved the way for a new wave of American cinema. Both are favorites of Tarantino, by the way. But then his career took a dive, beginning with Francis Ford Coppola, who personally threw him out of Apocalypse Now and replaced him with Martin Sheen. And the main fiasco was his part in Saturn III, where he got completely dubbed over.
Yes, you have a great body. May I use it?
Things started to get better just before he agreed to do Reservoir Dogs, thanks to his roles in The Last Temptation of Christ and Thelma and Louise. In short, the decision to act for Tarantino was returning to his roots, working with young directors, and a big risk for a career that had just started to level out.
Is that supposed to be funny?
Of course, his name helped the movie. As soon as the rumor that Keitel was going to be in Reservoir Dogs was confirmed, other stars began to consider the project themselves. That's why in the early stages, Christopher Walken expressed his interest, though later he changed his mind. Whereas Chris Penn, Steve Buscemi, and Tim Roth happily joined the project. Also, Samuel L. Jackson auditioned for the role of Holdaway, but Tarantino chose Randy Brooks over him.
This better not be some kind of Freddy joke, man.
That's the story of how an unknown writer with no directing experience got a star-studded cast and $1.5 million. Quentin needed to get some experience before he started shooting. So in June of 1991, he went to the Sundance Festival, which provided dozens of master classes, combining amateur cinematographers with stars of the industry. That's where Quentin and Steve Buscemi filmed a few practice scenes for Reservoir Dogs.
I mean, for all I know is you're the rat.
For all I know, you're the rat.
Yeah, all right, now you're using your fucking head. I mean, for all we know, he's the rat.
Well, he ain't the rat because he took a bullet for me. A rat wouldn't do that.
Hey, look, asshole, man, I'm right, okay? Somebody's a fucking rat.
They showed them to more experienced colleagues who considered Tarantino's style, for lack of a better word, childish. Static shots, the camera lying on the floor, and the lack of varied perspectives caused them to laugh with contempt. The only person who was inspired by the work and gave a lot of helpful advice was Terry Gilliam. As a result, Tarantino thanked him by including Gilliam's name in the credits of the film. The film was shot in the poor suburbs of Los Angeles, but the heart of all the action became a real abandoned funeral home. Hardly anyone notices, but in this scene, for example, Michael Madsen is sitting on a hearse, surrounded by coffins, and the conversation between Harvey Keitel and Steve Buscemi happens in an embalming room.
I don't know what we do. At that point, it was every man for himself, man.
When all the locations had been found, there was little left to do. After a week of rehearsals on the 29th of July, 1991, they began filming Reservoir Dogs. The greatest challenge during the 5-week shooting process was reserved for Tim Roth. He had to lie in a puddle of fake blood for up to 10 hours a day. By the evening, the syrup and dye concoction thickened, and he had to literally be scraped off the floor. At one point, Quentin considered replacing Tim with a doll, but the actor insisted that he would lie there as long as necessary.
I was panicking for a minute back there, but I got my senses back now.
This iconic torture scene was created thanks to Robert Kurtzman, who hadn't forgotten about his promise to help with special effects in exchange for the script From Dusk Till Dawn. While shooting, Quentin realized that he hadn't given Mr. Blue a single line, so he rewrote the opening scene in a diner between takes. As for the discussion, when Quentin's character explains the hidden meaning of Madonna's "like a virgin," he seriously thought that he had guessed her subliminal message.
You see, the pain is reminding the fuck machine what it was once like to be a virgin. Hence, like a virgin.
After the film came out, he met with Madonna and asked her if he had guessed correctly. She answered no, but that she really liked his interpretation.
I got Madonna's big dick coming out of my left ear, and Toby the Jet, I don't know what, coming out of my right.
During editing, Quentin met Harvey Weinstein for the first time. Their partnership, which was more like a bickering couple, would continue for another 27 years. Back then, Harvey insisted that they cut the torture scene from the film. This argument continued for a while, but the director remained unmoved and continued to demonstrate that no one was going to tell him how to make a movie. As for the scene, he slightly regretted leaving it in, because many would describe the film by saying, you know, that movie where the cop gets his ear cut off. The scene sparked much discussion and was the reason that it wasn't released on cassette in Great Britain and was viciously attacked by several publications. The newspaper Today stated that the scene should have been cut out, along with every other scene, maintaining that the work was nothing more than violence propaganda.
Kids shouldn't play so rough. Somebody's gonna start crying.
Quentin accepted these attacks with a smile, like Michael Madsen, who used to say that Mr. Blonde was the most positive persona in the movie.
I mean, I didn't find Mr. Blonde that bad a guy. I couldn't understand why people cheered when he was shot. I would have thought they'd be sorry to see him go, especially since he got shot by a rat. He didn't bullshit anybody. He just wanted to tell the truth.
But Madsen wasn't the only one affected by comments about his role. Steve Buscemi said that after the monologue about tips, he had to tip generously for life.
Recently, I forgot to tip a cab driver, and I thought, oh my God, if he sees the movie, he's gonna say that's the guy.
Mr. Pink's monologue was based on a real time in Tarantino's life, which his friends would often remember with distaste, since first he spent several years telling them about it, and then even immortalized his nonsense on film.
You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
Reservoir Dogs premiered at the Sundance Festival. It received so many glowing reviews there that a month later at Cannes, the film was pegged to be a revelation. Later at the film festival in Toronto, Reservoir Dogs received the prize for Best Film, and Quentin met Robert Rodriguez, who had brought his El Mariachi, which had been filmed for only $7,000. The directors quickly found common ground and became best friends. But more on that later. Meanwhile, Reservoir Dogs was released and made $3 million in the USA. This may seem unimpressive at first, but if you consider that the film was only shown in 26 theaters the first week, this number is more than adequate. In Great Britain, it was shown at 10 theaters and made £100,000 on opening weekend.
Now, the things you gotta remember are the details. It's the details that sell your story.
The picture smoothly gained momentum, and by the beginning of 1993, it was on everybody's lips. Reservoir Dogs was considered to be the best directing debut since the times of Citizen Kane. But there was a downside to all this attention. Quentin was accused multiple times of plagiarism, and while the influence of French New Wave cinema could be read between the lines, the number of similarities with the Hong Kong action movie City on Fire was truly suspicious. Here's what happens in one of the scenes of the film. A gang of robbers with the code names Brother Joe, Brother Chu, Brother Fu, and Brother Nam run after they fail to steal a diamond. The job was ruined because one of the robbers, a psychopath, started shooting. The police were lying in wait, tipped off by Brother Chu, who was undercover for the cops. During the escape, Brother Chu is saved by the more seasoned Brother Fu, who in turn provokes Brother Chu when he unloads 2 cartridges of bullets onto the cop's windshield. Brother Chu kills an innocent witness and is wounded in the stomach. Fu takes him to the meeting point at an abandoned warehouse. Fearing that they were betrayed, he calls in the big boss. The boss declares that Chu is a cop and turns the barrel of his gun on him. Fu reacts because he thinks Chu is innocent, and he gets out his gun too. The next scene finds them in a belligerent standoff. Look familiar?
That's your proof? You don't need proof when you have instinct.
Of course. It's worth mentioning that this is only a 20-minute segment of City on Fire. Although the connection can't be ignored, the style, dialogue, and plot structure of the films are completely different. But of course, this topic was too good for journalists to pass up at press conferences. At the Cannes Film Festival, Tarantino gave the press a clear answer.
I love City on Fire, and I have the poster for it framed in my house. It's a great movie. I steal from every movie. I steal from every single movie ever made. I love it. If my work has anything, it's that I'm taking this from this and that from that and mixing them together. And if people don't like them, then tough titty. Don't go and see it, all right? I steal from everything. Great artists steal. They don't do homages.
Many were not satisfied by this explanation, but Quentin completely unarmed the critics with his candor, which only added to his popularity. Catherine James was receiving calls from every agent, every producer, and every studio representative who were asking for Tarantino's previous screenplays. She sent them the same works which had been lying around the offices for years, unread, despite her having begged them to read them earlier. It's no surprise that right after the release of Reservoir Dogs, they started work on True Romance and Natural Born Killers. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back during the masterclasses at the Sundance Institute, Tarantino had met Tony Scott. Tony had been wanting to make a crime action film and offered to buy the rights to Reservoir Dogs. But Tarantino refused and asked him to read True Romance instead. He read it in one evening, and by the next day had used all his connections to buy the rights and find a $30 million budget. He also got Roger Avery to join the project, since the first version of the screenplay was his. Roger tweaked the screenplay a little bit to find the director's needs, and also rewrote the finale. Tony knew that this upset Quentin, whereas Scott's happy end was a compromise with Hollywood's expectations of a commercial film. But in fact, the director made 2 versions of the finale, and chose the one which he believed worked the best. Tarantino never publicly shared his disappointment, and called his work on True Romance exceptional.
Hello?
Hello, baby.
Clarence? You got it. Clarence, it's great to hear from you, man. What's going on?
I think by far he's the better guy to have done this movie. And also, it was exciting. The idea of seeing my world through Tony's eyes and have it look like that.
True Romance was produced by a company created by Quentin and Lawrence Bender, A Band Apart, named after the Jean-Luc Godard film Band à Part. Later, the company worked on all of Tarantino's films and partnered with Robert Rodriguez, John Woo, Tim Burton, Darren Aronofsky, and Luc Besson. After the premiere of True Romance, Quentin helped to promote the picture by going on the promo tour. And though he wasn't being paid for that, he went to great lengths to ensure the film's success at the box office. However, with Natural Born Killers, it was a different story.
My name will get brought up from time to time, but I think I've done a pretty good job of distancing myself from the film. Basically, if you like it, it's all Oliver. Good, bad, or indifferent. It has very little to do with me.
It's literally a candy lane of murder and mayhem.
To this day, Tarantino has not seen the film and doesn't want to discuss it. From the moment that the screenplay made it into Oliver Stone's hands, a quiet war began between the two directors. As you may remember, Tarantino had given the rights for Natural Born Killers to his friend, Rand Vossler, who had spent the last 4 years trying to make the movie and dreamed of directing it himself. Quentin had named only one condition. Rand was to shoot a small excerpt so that Quentin could make sure that their vision was the same. At that stage, Vossler had begun to collaborate with Don Murphy, who promised him $3 million for the budget. According to Tarantino, Vossler signed a contract with him, and 3 days later was removed as director and made co-producer instead. Having gotten his hands on the screenplay, Murphy passed it to Oliver Stone, who pretty much rewrote the whole thing with his colleagues. Tarantino was furious and said several times that everyone who was part of creating that film just wanted to use his newfound glory. Murphy countered by saying that he would never bet on a director whose Reservoir Dogs made less at the box office than Leprechaun.
You can't fix Ozzy's brain. I know that.
In another interview, Murphy explained that they had to rewrite the screenplay because, like all of Tarantino's screenplays, it seemed to be made up only of expletives.
Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite?
Similar quips and snide comments continued for more than a year, until both sides came to an agreement whereby Tarantino would stop airing his discontent in exchange for a tidy sum. He also insisted that his name not appear in the credits, though it ended up there anyway. A humble line read, "Story by Quentin Tarantino." Thanks to the agreement, Quentin made more than $500,000 in royalties on this project. Oliver Stone thought it was incredibly hypocritical to sever all ties with the film, but then agreed to receive royalties and a percentage of the profit. He was also highly displeased when he found out that Quentin had told the actors from Reservoir Dogs that if they ever worked with Stone, they would never work with him again. The story reached its climax with the release of a non-fiction book entitled Killer Instinct, which told the story of the creation of Natural Born Killers. Within the pages, it's easy to find dozens of jabs and insults pointed at Quentin, with most quotes belonging to Don Murphy.
If Quentin didn't agree with what was published in my book, he should have taken his grievances to a court of law. That's the civilized recourse society has provided for disagreements.
But Quentin didn't take them to court. On the 22nd of November 1997, in a Los Angeles restaurant, he beat Murphy up. He was stopped by the police on his way out, but Don didn't press charges. The conflict was mediated by Miramax co-founder Harvey Weinstein, who convinced the enemies to shake on it. But a few days later, Tarantino went on the Keenen Ivory Wayans show and gladly described, in detail, how he'd bitch-slapped Murphy. He sued Tarantino and demanded $5 million in moral damages. The case was rejected, and both sides agreed to stop talking dirt about each other.
Hey, fuck you, buddy boy.
Fuck you.
All right, fuck you too.
Fuck you talking to.
All right? Hey, fuck off.
But let's go back to 1992. After the premiere of Reservoir Dogs, Quentin spent 6 months in Amsterdam. The first few months he did what everyone does in Amsterdam. Later, Roger Avery joined him, and they started work on the screenplay that would later become Pulp Fiction. Quentin already had in his hands the proposal for his next project, with a budget of at least $1 million. This happened thanks to Danny DeVito, who was devastated at not being able to participate in the making of Reservoir Dogs. Later, Danny would make studios pay just to read a new Tarantino script, and later became the producer for Pulp Fiction. helping Quentin to receive an $8.5 million budget. Meanwhile, in the Netherlands, the screenwriters had come up with something epic. They took all the drafts and decided to combine them into a new project. First, Avery's Chaos Rules the World became the Golden Watch scene. They also added a deleted scene with the soiled car interior from True Romance, a perfected story about a date, and a dialogue that never made it into Natural Born Killers.
We're not at the finish yet, baby.
By mid-1993, they had it finished. Quentin asked Avery to continue working on the movie with him. But Roger needed money fast because he wanted to get married and to shoot his own film,
Killing Zoe.
So he sold the rights to Pulp Fiction.
Let's think of a seller.
The rights were bought immediately by Miramax Studios, and Tarantino began preparations for shooting. He was able to get almost the whole Reservoir Dogs team: Tim Roth, Steve Buscemi, Harvey Keitel, producer Lawrence Bender, creative director and designer David and Sandy Wasco, operator and dressage Sekula, who after a severe accident filmed Pulp Fiction from a wheelchair, and his irreplaceable helper and main supporter, editor Sally Menke.
I knew from meeting Quentin that it was going to be something really special.
Then he began casting the other roles. The main hero was to be Vic Vega, whose part was written for Michael Madsen, who rejected the role in favor of playing opposite Kevin Costner in Wyatt Earp. Later, he would come to regret that decision. The character was turned into Vic's brother, Vincent, and producer Lawrence Bender was planning on inviting Daniel Day-Lewis to play the part. But Quentin had an idea, which caused everyone to think him bat crazy.
Vincent.
Yes. Now it's difficult to imagine anyone else playing Vincent Vega, but by 1993 no one was taking John Travolta seriously anymore. In the 70s, the head of Disney Studios, Michael Eisner, called him the biggest star on the planet since he had been nominated for an Oscar for Saturday Night Fever, and starred in the cult favorite Grease. However, a series of unfortunate decisions led him to act in films like Chains of Gold, The Experts, and Look Who's Talking.
As much as I like John Travolta, I couldn't bring myself to watch some fucking talking baby movie.
Oh! Who was that?
People had stopped taking Travolta seriously, but Tarantino saw genius in him. In one of his favorite films, Blowout, by Brian De Palma, Travolta put on what Quentin would call one of the best acting performances in the history of cinema. From their first meeting, it was clear fate brought them together. When he stepped into Tarantino's cluttered apartment, Travolta, who owned a 20-bedroom mansion in Maine, apartments in Florida, and 3 personal jets, was shocked. Quentin was living at the same apartment that John had rented when he first arrived in Los Angeles in 1974.
Nobody knows it right from the start. I gave you my heart. Whoa.
After Tarantino spent several hours quoting lines from Travolta's movies, played Grease the board game with him, and showed him the complete collection of his films, John accepted the offer to play Vincent Vega.
All right, it was a miracle. Can we go now?
To Tarantino's surprise, the decision to cast Travolta was not met with universal applause. It even became the reason why the heads of Miramax started to doubt their investment in the project. Even Lawrence Bender was unsure in the beginning.
You can get anybody in the world. Why do you want John Travolta?
But Tarantino didn't budge. It was Travolta, or no one. And he even told the producers that he wouldn't make the film if John wasn't in it.
Don't be looking at me like that, all right? I can feel your look.
Once again, under pressure from Quentin, the producers and the studio backed off. Later, thanks to Keitel, the cast was joined by his neighbor, Bruce Willis. Turns out he was a fan of Reservoir Dogs and could quote any line from it. Though Quentin had initially hoped to get Sylvester Stallone to play Butch, he was so impressed with Willis's enthusiasm that he chose him, giving yet another actor's career a second wind.
So, Mr. Willis, let me ask you a question here. Is this the finest moment of your acting career, or what?
This is the pinnacle. From here on in, it slides down the backside of the
Pulp Fiction allowed critics to see Bruce for the first time as more than.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
As for Samuel L. Jackson, despite having a role written specifically for him, he almost jumped ship when he came to a reading only to find it was an audition with another candidate, Paul Calderone.
Oh, Vincent Vega, our man in Amsterdam.
Who initially got the part. After that, Samuel went to see Tarantino in person and read the monologue from the Bible, adding in some of his own improvisations.
And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger.
His skill amazed the director so much that Tarantino cast him in almost all of his films and never made him audition again.
That's all you had to say.
As for those who didn't make it into the film, it's worth mentioning that Ellen DeGeneres auditioned for the role, which was eventually played by Rosanna Arquette.
Which one's Trudy? One with all the shit in her face? No, that's Jody. That's my wife.
Finally, having read the screenplay to Uma Thurman over the phone and convincing her to participate, on the 20th of September, 1993, he began shooting Pulp Fiction. Filming had started, and still, Quentin was choosing who he was going to play. Though he saw himself as Lance the drug dealer, he decided on playing the anxious Jimmy.
Don't fucking Jimmy me, Jules! Okay?
Thinking that he wanted to be on the other side of the camera in the final scene. Vincent Vega and Marcellus Wallace's wife. The scenes involving Tarantino were directed by Robert Rodriguez.
They look like a couple of dorks.
Ha ha ha, you're closed, motherfucker.
When one thinks of Pulp Fiction, one instantaneously pictures the interior of the Jack Rabbit Slim's restaurant. The decorations for it cost $100,000. No wonder the milkshakes were so expensive.
Did you just order a $5 shake?
Mm-hmm.
On a serious note, besides the obvious references, there were a few more interesting ones. The walls of the restaurant were hung with posters of Roger Corman's films, one of Tarantino's favorite directors. The waiter, played by Steve Buscemi, looks like one of Quentin's favorite musicians, Buddy Holly.
Hi, I'm Buddy. What can I get you? The world's smallest violin playing just for the waitress.
And the tables made of cars were borrowed from the movie Speedway, starring Elvis Presley.
All you gotta do is just let yourself go.
By the way, the same building that was home to Jack Rabbit Slim's also housed Butch's hotel room, the room which Vincent and Jules enter, and the basement of the Mason-Dixie pawn shop. It was from the parking lot of this very building, during filming, that Quentin's car was stolen, the same car which Vincent drives in the movie. 20 years later, a policeman found it accidentally when he stopped two teens who were stealing it from its new owner, who had no idea that he had spent the last 15 years riding around in Quentin Tarantino's car.
What's more chicken shit than fucking with a man's automobile? I mean, don't fuck with another man's vehicle. You don't do it. It's just against the rules.
In Pulp Fiction, Quentin included more references than in any other of his works. Vince and Mia's dance was a reference to 8.5. Butch and Marcel's meeting, Psycho. And the glowing case was from Kiss Me Deadly. As for the dialogues, half of the movie was references to other films.
You want that gun, don't you, Zed? Go ahead and pick it up.
You want that gun? Pick it up. I wish you would.
The most important of which was Jules' sermon, which practically copied Karate Kiba.
And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious
anger, who poison and destroy my brothers.
Considering the result of the premiere, which occurred at Cannes in May of 1994, it's hard to believe that the film only cost $8.5 million. Hell, just Bruce Willis's paycheck for Die Hard 2 was bigger than the whole budget for Pulp Fiction.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
A few days later, Quentin received the grand prize of the film festival.
Pulp Fiction.
Cannes started a chain reaction. The movie received awards from the Film Critics Association for Best Picture, Best Directing, Best Screenplay, Best Acting done by John Travolta, as well as Golden Globe and BAFTA for Best Screenplay, as well as 7 Oscar nominations. Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor and Actress, Best Director, Screenplay, and Film Editing. But at the 67th Academy Awards ceremony, Pulp Fiction together with The Shawshank Redemption were victims of the sweeping success that was Forrest Gump.
I gotta pee.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
It was one of the most predictable battles for the Oscars. But Pulp Fiction did get a statuette for Best Original Screenplay, and their acceptance speech is considered to be one of the best in the history of the Oscars.
My wife Gretchen, who I love more than anything in the world, and I really have to take a pee right now, so I'm gonna go. Thank you.
While he was working on Pulp Fiction, Quentin had agreed to play in a few of his friends' movies. Of course, if he had known how much attention would be drawn to his film and to himself, he probably wouldn't have done it. But since he had promised, he couldn't back out now. Filming the cameo roles for Rory Kelly's Sleep With Me and Alexander Rockwell's Somebody to Love took less than a day.
But the opposite sex is the fact that you think funny gets you somewhere, all right? But funny doesn't get your dick sucked. What can I get you?
The same can be said for the phenomenal moment in Robert Rodriguez's Desperado.
Muchas gracias.
However, for his role in Destiny Turns on the Radio, he had to set aside several weeks right in the middle of the promo tour of his own film.
For every ending, there's a new beginning.
What are you, goddamn fortune cookie?
That was the moment when Pulp Fiction became a box office success, making over $200 million and having broken even 25 times over. At the end of '94, Quentin and a few of his close friends, Robert Rodriguez, Alexander Rockwell, and Allison Anders, collaborated on a film called 4 Rooms. There was supposed to be 5 rooms, but Richard Linklater, the 5th in the group, declined to film his episode. Things didn't work out with the lead actor either. All the directors wrote their episodes with Steve Buscemi in mind, but he was too busy and was replaced by Tim Roth.
I've got to get out of here.
Money!
The episode shot by Quentin was a retelling of a story from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which the characters themselves openly admit to.
You ever see the one called The Man from Rio with Peter Lorre and Steve McQueen?
Besides Tim Roth, the main roles were played by Tarantino,
Chester, not Sir, Chester.
Paul Calderone, who Quentin hired as a kind of apology for not giving him the role of Jules, and Bruce Willis. An interesting fact about Bruce: when he played the part for free, he broke the rules of the Actors Guild, and because of that wasn't mentioned in the credits.
Okay, Ellen, I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry about that. What do you want me to do?
Speaking of the credits, they're almost the best thing of the movie. Unfortunately, complete failure awaited the film. Critics tore it apart, dubbing it the main disappointment of the year.
Why should that surprise anybody? When the hell has America, ever been fair? We might be right every once in a while, but we're very rarely fair.
Alexander Rockwell and Allison Anders' episodes were dragged through the dirt. And though Tarantino and Rodriguez were not quite so unfortunate, it still didn't help the picture to break even, becoming the first and only financial train wreck in Quentin's career. But there was no time to grieve, since in 1995, 6 years after it was written, the screenplay for From Dusk Till Dawn was finally approved.
Come on in, pussy lovers!
Having decided to focus on the role of Richard Gecko, Quentin asked Robert Rodriguez to take the director's chair.
And because me and Robert were friends and buddies and stuff, and he read it and he came back and he goes, "Man, this is a really cool script. I'd do this tomorrow, man."
Recognize this.
He didn't recognize shit.
Seth, I'm telling you, the way he looked at us, you especially, I knew he knew.
Miramax gave the project a $19 million budget, which was more than all the duo's previous film budgets combined. That was how the friends received complete creative freedom and began to cast actors for the roles. The first to be picked were Quentin and Rodriguez's friends, Harvey Keitel.
Has anybody here read a real book about vampires, or are we just remembering what some movie said?
Juliette Lewis.
Where are you taking us?
Mexico.
What's in Mexico?
Mexicans.
Danny Trejo.
Welcome to the Titty Twister.
And Cheech Marin.
You can find cheaper pussy anywhere. Fuck it.
Later, as a nod to B-movies, roles were given to B-movie star Fred Williamson.
Anything you'd have to say to them? Say to me first.
And makeup artist Tom Savini, who had worked on Friday the 13th and Dawn of the Dead.
I met Quentin a long time ago at a convention where I was a guest of honor. Quentin was a kid in the crowd. Said, Mr. Savini, I wonder if you'd come by this video store where I work and sign some of your videos. We have lots of old videos. You'd probably like them. We're in Manhattan Beach. Okay. I went, because I'm nice to everybody. You know why? They grew up to be Quentin Tarantino.
Next, Robert Rodriguez brought Salma Hayek to the project, who initially kept rejecting the proposal because of her fear of snakes. Rodriguez even lied, saying that he'd offered the part to Madonna, after which Salma went to 2 months of psychotherapy to get rid of her phobia. However, the biggest challenge was finding someone to play Seth Gecko. Quentin offered the part to John Travolta, Michael Madsen, and Christopher Walken. Robert offered it to Antonio Banderas, but everyone had a reason for turning it down. But while Tarantino was filming the final episodes of ER as a guest director, he met George Clooney and offered him the part. From Dusk Till Dawn became his big screen debut.
You think I'm fucking playing with you, asshole? Do you want this little girl to die, or that little girl, or yourself?
There are a few interesting facts worth mentioning, one of which is the wonderful reference to cheap films of the 80s, where one actor was often used to play several different characters.
Hey, not so fast.
Step aside, asshole.
Oh, are they cycles or?
What was that?
And another is that Jules' monologue from Pulp Fiction was initially written for the head of the Fuller family. And of course, the reference to the screenwriter's own foot fetish. Thanks to the role of Richard Gecko, Quentin found himself in the company of Val Kilmer, Burt Reynolds, and Marlon Brando. All of these actors were nominated for a Golden Raspberry for Worst Supporting Actor in '96.
You think it was funny?
Nonetheless, many consider it to be the best performance of Tarantino's acting career. He was able to bring to the screen a real psychopath without exaggerated grimaces and pages of text which he usually hid behind. Years later, many critics began to observe that his performance was one of the highlights of the movie.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Can we one more time? I'm sorry.
The picture was released in January of '96 and led the box office its opening weekend, but then lost momentum, collecting around $30 million. This number was a disappointment for Miramax Studios, which had high hopes for the project. The press didn't help the picture either. It not only criticized Tarantino, but found fault with Rodriguez and Clooney as well. But, as always, time will tell, since Dusk Till Dawn became a cult classic, which entertains movie lovers to this day. And though Quentin's acting skills were subject to vicious attacks, his ability to write scripts was never in question. So as soon as Quentin finished filming, Tony Scott invited him to help with the dialogues for Crimson Tide starring Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman.
The one thing is some of the dialogue was just a little like normal movie dialogue. It had its brain. It just needed a little bit more of a heart. So I took it and did a rewrite on it. Although I actually didn't change any scenes. I just changed the dialogue. Just tried to bring more characterization out.
Who played the German sub-commander in The Enemy Below with Robert Mitchum? Was it Kurt Jurgens or Hardy Kruger? Sir. Wrong answer! Drop down and give me 20! Now!
Quentin is a very rare animal, yeah. that what he does, he brings a reality to these people with a sense of humor. And it's very difficult to find a writer who can give you darkness and humor together.
Despite a few setbacks, interest in Tarantino grew, and the question, what would be the writer's next big picture, tormented all of Hollywood's news outlets. His opponents never missed an opportunity to mention that his previous works were co-written with Roger Avary, and that without him, Quentin couldn't produce a single line. The pressure grew when he rejected the offers to direct Speed and Men in Black. It was only by the end of 1996 that he announced that his next project would be a screen adaptation of Elmore Leonard's novel, Rum Punch. Having bought the rights to the novel a few years back, the director nursed the idea for several years, making lots of changes to the original source. He switched the location from Florida to his familiar Los Angeles, changed the skin color and last name of the heroine, the name of the movie to Jackie Brown, and of course, spiced up the dialogue.
What's wrong with you knocking on the door like the goddamn police? You looking to get shot?
Thought you might be asleep.
You keep fucking with me, you the one gonna be asleep forever.
He made so many changes that for more than a year he was afraid to show the screenplay to the book's author. But when Elmore read it, he told Tarantino that it was the best script he had read in his entire life. Emboldened by the author's support, at the beginning of 1997, Quentin began casting the main roles. Pam Grier was an obvious choice for him. When the actress came to the audition, Quentin's office walls had been hung with her posters.
And I said, "Did you put this up because I was coming over?" And he said, "No, I was gonna take them down because you were coming over."
Is that what I think it is?
What do you think it is?
I think it's a gun pressed up against my dick.
Well, you thought right.
He also desperately wanted to work with Robert Forster. They met back in '91 when Robert came to audition for the part of Joe Cabot in Reservoir Dogs.
I had read for him about 5 years prior for Reservoir Dogs, and I thought I killed that audition.
But Tarantino chose Lawrence Tierney, while promising Forster that their paths would definitely cross. 6 years later, he met him at a restaurant.
The thing happened right here at this table. Over there walks in Quentin Tarantino.
And offered him a role which brought the actor his first Oscar nomination and resurrected his career.
And this guy gave me a gift, the size of which cannot be exaggerated.
I'm Max Cherry, bail bondsman.
It's weird that no nominations were given to De Niro, who played a very atypical role for himself.
That's Japan.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, I could tell.
Wanna fuck?
Yeah.
Or to Samuel L. Jackson, whose performance makes your blood run cold. Take the scene with Chris Tucker, for example.
I'm sorry, man, but I ain't getting no goddamn Trump.
As for Chris Tucker, soon after this small role in Tarantino's film, Tucker got famous, and for a time became one of the highest paid actors in the world. Quentin often expressed his disappointment with the lack of nominations for Grier, saying that she deserved to become the first black actress to receive an Oscar for a lead role.
Come on, it's getting silly now.
Oh, silly? You want to see some motherfucking silly? If I have to tell you to shut up one more time, I'm gonna shut you up.
By that time, Tarantino's ability to breathe new life into an actor's deflated career had become legendary. He was often interrogated about who he was going to save next.
All right, I'm not coming from that place. I'm trying to cast the best actors, or the coolest actors, in whatever role. And I'm not using the hot star list in order to do it.
Thinking about you every day. And I don't even know.
Jackie Brown premiered on the 29th of December, 1997, and made $10 million the first weekend, while having a budget of only $12 million. In total, the picture made it to the $74 million mark. It wasn't the success of Pulp Fiction, but it wasn't a failure, though. That's exactly how Quentin felt about it. In addition to the lack of nominations for Best Director and Best Screenplay, the less than exuberant reviews were what pulled the rug out from under him. He reacted aggressively to news headlines like, "The grossly overrated Tarantino," saying it was the press that had spent the last 5 years overestimating him in the first place. To describe what he was feeling, it would be enough to say that his next movie would come out 6 years later. A few months after the premiere of Jackie Brown, Quentin made another attempt to make it as an actor in the play Wait Until Dark with Marissa Tomei. The Broadway premiere ended with a standing ovation. In the audience were many of Tarantino's fans and colleagues, and it seemed that a play with $3 million in pre-sale tickets was bound to be a success and become a Broadway sensation, and it did. In the reviews the next day, the critics attacked Quentin with such ferocity that it eclipsed all the bad press that he had received during his whole career. And though Tarantino parried the blows with scathing comments back at his opponents, he was not prepared for the battle against the theater critics. 2 months later, having played the required amount of shows, he left Broadway. After this series of unfortunate events, shattered and upset, Quentin Tarantino shut himself up in a small apartment and began to write a new script. The Nameless project was about the Second World War, combining 3 stories, none of which had a finale. Unable to overcome his writing block, Tarantino left the bustle of New York and Los Angeles and spent a year and a half in Austin, Texas.
That's what I love about Austin. It's just so damn small.
Resigned to smoking marijuana, drinking, and watching thousands of films in the company of his faithful friends, Robert Rodriguez, Richard Linklater, and Mike Judge. However, he quickly tired of the pointless waste of time and found an annual festival called QT, where he would show favorite movies from his gigantic collection and tell stories of forgotten, unrecognized directors and present new pictures of unknown filmmakers from around the world.
Well, the movie will start in just a little bit. Then what we're going to do is afterwards, I'm going to come back. And I'm going to talk about a couple anecdotes about the film and mention a few facts.
In 2000, Quentin returned to Los Angeles to act in the comedy Little Nicky, where he played the deacon.
He loves all of his children while he loves you. And he loves you.
During the visit to LA, he went to a party hosted by Miramax and bumped into Uma Thurman. They started reminiscing about making Pulp Fiction, and the actress reminded Quentin that once he had come into her trailer with the idea for a screenplay.
When I woke, every emotion in me was dead. Every emotion that is except one. Desire. The desire for revenge.
She remembered that the story was based on Francois Truffaut's film, The Bride Wore Black. It was about a female murderer who was shot at in a clock tower by a gang led by Bill, but she survived and wanted revenge. That evening, Thurman asked him the most important question of her career.
Are we ever going to do Kill Bill?
These words hypnotized the director. He went home, found the 30-page draft, and read it all night long.
We not only see she is a bride, but she's 8 months pregnant. Interior wedding chapel day, overhead shot. We hear step, step, step.
A few weeks later, at Uma's birthday party, he told her that the screenplay was a present. However, the 200-page final script appeared a year later.
Bill, it's your baby.
Cut to black screen. The fourth film by Quentin Tarantino.
The script for Kill Bill can be confidently called the anti-Jackie Brown.
You believe that shit?
Tarantino was not about to make the same mistake twice. Minimal dialogue, tons of action, a focus on young actors, and his typical anti-linear plot. As soon as they read the screenplay, Miramax offered him $40 million, and the project started up in April of 2001.
So the whole idea on Kill Bill was to test the limits of my talent.
After Uma Thurman, the cast was joined by Michael Madsen and Samuel L. Jackson, though Jackson's role was more of a cameo. Lucy Liu was invited to play the role of O-Ren Ishii after Quentin saw her in Shanghai Noon. He was so spellbound by her acting that he even rewrote a character for her who was initially meant to be purely Japanese.
The price you pay for bringing up either my Chinese or American heritage as a negative is, I collect your fucking head.
It was harder to find an actor to play Bill. Tarantino invited Kevin Costner and Warren Beatty, but both refused. Costner is practically famous for saying no to Quentin's films, and Beatty lacked the desire to devote time to learning martial arts. Therefore, Quentin offered the role to a person who didn't need to learn martial arts at all. David Carradine became the perfect candidate. First of all, he had starred in many martial arts films.
You know, I did 11 Shakespearean plays. And
Second of all, he had been in Mean Streets, one of Tarantino's favorite films. And third, he desperately needed to resurrect his career.
Just forget the past.
Well, the actors had been chosen and were ready to start shooting. The studio gave Quentin the green light, and he was already getting the film crew together, when in the middle of 2001 it became known that Uma Thurman was pregnant, and obviously could not start working. And though Harvey Weinstein insisted that Quentin find a different female lead, the director was unmoved. He answered Miramax in his typical way.
If Joseph von Sternberg is getting ready to make Morocco, and Marlene Dietrich gets pregnant, he waits for Dietrich.
Because of this, filming was delayed for a year, but the director didn't waste his time and began looking for the rest of his team. He invited his favorite stuntwoman, Zobel, who is behind most of the bride's crazy moves. The acting ensemble was joined by Gordon Liu, who played the squad leader of Johnny Moe's Crazy 88. And the teacher, Pai Mei. Initially, Quentin had planned on playing Pai Mei himself, and even completed 2 months of martial arts training, but changed his mind at the last second. True to his tradition, Quentin also invited actresses who needed a job, like Vivica Fox.
He was in the video store, and he saw Two Can Play That Game sitting on the shelf. And he said that it stopped him, and he said, wow, I haven't seen Vivica since really Independence Day. And he went, there's my Vernita.
And Daryl Hannah.
That's right. I killed your master. And now I'm gonna kill you too. What's cooler than cool? L. Driver.
Later, Robert Richardson joined them, who had previously filmed Platoon, Casino, and A Few Good Men. And it's worth mentioning that he also filmed Natural Born Killers, and had often worked with Oliver Stone.
Repeats itself, pointing down to the future.
In order to choreograph the fight scenes and train the actors, they hired Wu Ping Yuen, who had worked on The Matrix and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The music was done by rapper.
Listen, I met him when I was doing the promotion for the film Iron Monkey.
He asked me would I like to produce the soundtrack in the way that I produce Wu-Tang albums. I said, well, it's, whatever, I do, that's easy. I mean, that's like nothing. If that's what you want, consider it done.
And Robert Rodriguez, who required that Tarantino pay him a salary of exactly $1. Tarantino returned the favor when he insisted on the same deal for filming a piece of Robert Rodriguez's Sin City. But more on that later. Another interesting fact, Sonny Chiba was invited to play the role of Hattori Hanzo.
And I've been wanting to work with Sonny since I was a little kid. And Sonny Chiba, one of his coolest things that he did amongst all these great movies is he had a TV show. All right, the Japanese title of the show was Kage no Gunda. And each time they did a new show, he was a different Hattori Hanzo. It'd be like, Hattori Hanzo the first, and then he'd be Hattori Hanzo the second. And so I just continued that philosophy when I wrote my Hattori Hanzo. So he's Hattori Hanzo the 100th in Kill Bill.
You must have big rats. You need a Hattori Hanzo's stew.
Sonny is a legend of Japanese martial arts films.
That guy up there, it's Sonny Chiba.
Darian?
Yeah, the one in black.
Who in real life likes to make katanas and retired from acting after his role in Kill Bill.
28年前、もう二度と作られると神仏に誓ったことを私は破り、そしてやり終えた。
Only 5 months after Thurman gave birth to her son, on the 17th of June 2002, filming finally commenced.
Action!
When talking about the creation of this film, Sooner or later, all discussions lead to the House of Blue Leaves. Tarantino wanted to create the most epic action scene of all time, and was willing to do anything to achieve that vision. In order to completely avoid computer graphics, he insisted that the special effects team use a method from Japanese films, where they load the stuntmen up with condoms full of fake blood. Even the blood was chosen with deadly precision.
I don't want horror movie blood, alright? I want samurai blood.
In the end, more than 1,500 liters of fake blood was spilled. The scene became a trial for the whole film crew, and for the actors and the stuntmen. And instead of 2 weeks, the predicted time needed to shoot the scene, it took 2 months.
I've always considered action directors the greatest movie directors in the world. If you can do action well, then you're the greatest. Great job.
Its final version, by the way, was shown in the US and many countries in Europe in black and white, whereas in Japan, for example, it was shown in color. All this because the MPAA wanted to give it a rating of NC-17 instead of the typical R rating. One of the most random lines in the film is the comment made by the club manager with regards to Bud's hat.
How many times have I told you? Don't wear that fucking hat here.
The truth is that Quentin couldn't stand that hat, but Michael Madsen believed it was an essential part of his character's image, so the director edited the screenplay and immortalized his distaste.
That I want you to keep that shit kicker hat at home.
Also, in front of the club where Bud works, Butch's Honda Civic is parked, the same one which Jackie Brown drove. But Quentin didn't limit himself to references to his own films. Kill Bill became a paradise for Easter egg hunters. A scene worth special mention is the one where Daryl Hannah is depicting the pain of Elle Driver, clearly inspired by the suffering of Pris from Blade Runner, which she had depicted 20 years earlier. Another interesting scene was this one, filmed at a real Mexican brothel. All the extras seen on the screen were real members of this ancient profession.
Esteban was a pimp and a friend of Bill's mother.
And if you were wondering why Thurman didn't star in any more of Quentin's films, the answer surfaced only in 2018. On one of the last days of shooting, Uma asked to be replaced with a stunt double during this scene. However, no double was scheduled for that day, and the stunt coordinator had the day off. So Tarantino convinced her to do the scene herself, reassuring her that there was no danger involved. A few minutes later, the actress lost control of the car and crashed it into a tree. She received many injuries, including a concussion and knee injuries. It was this event which corrupted the chemistry between them. They only made peace later in 2018, when Quentin helped the actress get footage of this event, which she attached to the sexual assault charges in the Harvey Weinstein lawsuit. But that's a separate story altogether. Filming took 155 days and finished on the 3rd of March, 2003, 3 months later than the shooting schedule.
Yeah, we're way over schedule, and we're way over our original budget. But it's still the biggest motherfucking bargain in town. We're Miramax's competition to the Matrix. We're Miramax's competition to Die Another Day in Star Wars.
Kill Bill was supposed to be one composition lasting around 3 hours, but Harvey Weinstein suggested that Quentin split it into 2 parts. Tarantino happily agreed, since that gave him the chance to expand the characters' backstories and action scenes more.
This is what you get for fucking around with your cruisers! Go home to your mother!
Kill Bill Volume 1 premiered on the 29th of September 2003, and Volume 2 on the 8th of April the next year. Together, the pictures brought in over $350 million and became Quentin's most successful work to date. Of course, this time, he didn't expect any recognition from the Academy. The film wasn't nominated in a single category at the Oscars, but at least Uma Thurman was nominated for the Golden Globe for both volumes. The second time, she was joined by David Carradine. However, the main success of this trilogy was the fact that after a series of unfortunate events and failures, Tarantino once again regained confidence in his abilities.
I'm just imagining this, so shut the hell up.
Oh, it tells you something about your state of mind, don't it?
The year after that, he filmed a scene from Sin City to pay back his favor from Robert Rodriguez.
You better stop. You're making him mad.
Whatever you say.
You got the bouncing headlights, fanning out.
It was Quentin's first and last experience working with digital cameras.
Hey, and let's have a big thank you and round of applause to our guest director today.
Special guest director.
The director is known for his faithfulness to film, and when asked how he felt about working with digital media, he always answered like this.
I think it's the death keel. I think it's the death rattle. Yeah, I do. And I also have even another whole aspect about it. I've always believed in the magic of movies.
Yeah.
And to me, the magic of movies is connected to 35 millimeter. Because everyone thinks, you can't help but think, that when you're filming something on film, that you're recording movement. You're not recording movement. You are just taking a series of still pictures. There's no movement in movies at all. They are still pictures. But when shown at 24 frames a second, through a light bulb, it creates the illusion of movement. So thus, as opposed to a recording device, when you're watching a movie, a film print, you are watching an illusion. And to me, that illusion is connected to the magic of movies.
In 2005, in one of his interviews, Quentin let slip that he loved the show CSI. The producers of the show contacted him immediately and asked him to write and direct the final episodes of the 5th season, and Quentin gladly agreed.
Son of a bitch. He's screwing with us.
Afterward, Quentin returned to Austin. There, he presented the film Hostel by Eli Roth, which he had produced.
Now speak.
What the fuck do you want me to say?
American.
At the same time, Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez were concocting a new project.
I would go to Quentin's house, and he'd screen old trailers from the 70s.
Kiss the girls and make them die.
Like Vanishing Point, Rolling Thunder, some sexploitation and zombie stuff. Then he'd play a feature, all scratched up with missing reels and things. Then more trailers in a second feature.
He hasn't a 00 number, but he lives a doubly dangerous life.
It's a great experience to watch movies this way.
Cosmic nightmare that sends you into the incredible, berserk world of
I told Quentin, I always wanted to do a double feature. Hey, why don't you direct one and I'll do the other? And he replied, and we've got to call it Grindhouse.
Planet Terror and Death Proof. Only at the Grindhouse.
They chose 2 simple stories for the opening pictures, neither of which they had originally planned to film. The first part became Planet Terror, which Robert Rodriguez was in charge of, and the second, Tarantino's Death Proof. The idea, like the title, like the film, came to Tarantino out of fear of getting in an accident like this. He decided to buy a Volvo, a car famous for its safety. However, his friend told him he could buy any car, give it to the stuntman, and for $10,000 they would make it death-proof. Voila. Initially, Quentin had planned to invite Mickey Rourke to play the lead role, but because of a timing conflict, he didn't make it to the project. He was replaced by Kurt Russell, who became the star of the picture.
The fun part has been working with Quentin in creating that character, and he's it's different from anything I've done. Ready to fly, bitch. But as we all know, when you go to work for Quentin Tarantino, you do it for the money. That's certainly why I'm here.
Hey! Ladies! That was fun!
Also, one of the roles was played by Tarantino's favorite stuntwoman, Zobel. When she got to the set, she was shocked because she had been sure to the last moment that she'd heard wrong and that she would just be doing stunts.
So when I saw my name, I of course think that's a joke just for me. And then he's kind of flicking through the pages. I keep seeing my name again and again, and I'm sitting there just sort of, why are you not explaining that this is a big deal?
Zoe was joined by Tracy Toms and Rosario Dawson, who would work side by side for the third film in 2 years.
We're playing characters who've done lots of movies together and traveled the world together. Rosario and I have done 2 movies together, and we traveled the world together. I'm like, come on, let's make this shit happen.
But their roles in Descent and Rent were not as exciting for them as the chance to work with Tarantino.
And we auditioned together.
We just kind of almost did the whole script.
And he's sitting there going, oh my God, I feel like I'm watching a movie. We're like, that's the motherfucking point, dog.
And of course, the father-son acting duo Michael and James Parks, who played the father and son policemen Earl and Edgar McGraw.
Well, what are you gonna do? Not a goddamn thing.
Earl's character first appeared back in From Dusk Till Dawn.
Be back at it tomorrow. Tonight I'm gonna sit down that box and get high on a Georgia pine.
And Edgar's character in From Dusk Till Dawn 2. Later, they were the ones who investigated the massacre at the clock tower.
Give me the gore details. Son number one. It's a goddamn massacre, Pop.
Michael Parks was also in Kill Bill and played another role, Esteban Vijallo.
Senor Esteban Vijallo, may I join you?
Only on the condition that you call me Esteban.
The 2 parts of Grindhouse were shot at the same time, which allowed the directors to constantly bounce ideas off each other and share insights. The filming lasted from September to December of 2006. Interestingly, this was the first and last film in Quentin's career when he personally operated the camera. Maybe that's why there are so many feet.
The hell are my keys? Oh, here they are.
Later, the directors combined their pictures and added a few fake trailers. These trailers were directed by their friends, Eli Roth,
Thanksgiving,
Edgar Wright,
Don't. If you are thinking of seeing this film alone, don't.
and Rob Zombie.
Werewolf Women of the SS.
Rodriguez made another one, but later Machete actually became a real movie.
Machete.
Also, because of the double feature aspect, large pieces of the dialogue were cut and most of the scenes were shortened. But the main difference between the 2 versions of the film was the private dance scene and the accident that followed.
I really enjoy the fact that if you count the minutes, it actually hasn't changed that much. But it has changed things 180 degrees emotionally. Because something as simple as shouting, that stuntman Mike is stalking the girls outside the restaurant. You actually see the pictures of the girls, and you know he's the villain. You know he's been there, and you still don't believe. That's what I love, the way the tone changes between the 2 movies. And I'm very proud of what I was able to do. That while changing very little.
When he finished editing, Tarantino described Death Proof as,
Death Proof has got to be the worst movie I've ever made. And for a left-handed movie, that wasn't so bad, all right? So if that's the worst I ever get, I'm good.
Love that philosophy.
The film was released in April of 2007, and from the beginning faced a small problem, because most of the audience simply didn't know what a double feature was. They would start to leave the theater right after Planet Terror. However, the theater staff quickly remedied the situation by explaining to every person who tried to walk out that there was another movie in store. Unfortunately, this didn't help Grindhouse much. The director's idea failed in the States, and the distributors canceled similar showings in Great Britain. Instead, they released the films the way they would in countries which never had double features, as part of their cinema culture. First, they would release Death Proof, and then Planet Terror a month later. Although the director's idea flopped in the end, each picture broke even and received wonderful reviews, inasmuch as that is possible for B-movies. After that, Quentin started work on Django. Actually, on Sukiyaki Western Django, where he had a small role and was an advisor to the director, Takashi Miike. This film was a parody of spaghetti westerns, which are a parody of classical westerns, which aren't that serious to begin with. So there was no way Quentin was going to miss out on participating in something like that.
What can I say? At the end, I am an anime otaku at heart.
For 7 years, Quentin was haunted by the idea of returning to an abandoned but not forgotten project about the Second World War. Back in 2007, it was called Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied France. He began rewriting in January 2008 and finished in July. His draft became the foundation of the first 2 chapters, whereas the following chapters were newly created. In the process, the name changed to Inglourious Bastards, a reference to Enzo Castellari's film of the same name.
Get in the truck, you bastard.
But he didn't stop there. In this scene, Aldo presents himself with the real name of the director.
Scusi con me? Gorlami. Ancora una volta. Gorlami.
And for the duration of the scene, standing behind the main characters is the real Enzo Castellari.
Gates good, ladies and gentlemen. That's a wrap on Enzo Castellari for the movie.
By the way, in the original title, Inglourious Bastards, there are 2 mistakes which Tarantino never explained. The English screenplay included a lot of dialogue in German and French, so Quentin asked his friend director Tom Tykwer to translate the German, and the French translations he entrusted to the actors. Later, having reunited with Lawrence Bender, who hadn't worked on his last film, he received a budget of $75 million and started choosing actors. First, he invited Harvey Keitel and Samuel L. Jackson, but you won't be able to see them in the movie, because Harvey voiced the officer talking to Hans Landa in Aldo Rain.
Now bring them straight to me for a debriefing. Is that clear, Lieutenant?
Yes, sir.
Over and out.
While Samuel was the narrator.
Shoshana has a collection of over 350 nitrate film prints.
They were joined by Eli Roth and Omar Doom, who had previously starred in Death Proof.
Dude fucking cut himself falling out of his time machine.
Omar Doom, by the way, met Quentin in '98 and began his acting career after following Quentin's advice. After working with him on the previous movie, Omar found out that the director often named his characters after people close to him.
Omar third most, he'll be Donnie's assistant.
I don't speak Italian.
Like I said, third best. Just keep your fucking mouth shut.
The same privilege was granted to Julie Dreyfus, who had a whole family named after her.
All the Jewish families in this area have been accounted for, except the Dreyfuses.
The idea to invite Brad Pitt came to Tarantino while he was still writing the screenplay.
As I was writing the script, it went from, oh, Brad could be good in this, to Brad could be damn good in this, to Brad would be fucking awesome in this, to, okay, now I need to get fucking Brad, because if I don't, what am I going to do?
Lieutenant Aldo Rain, you're the bastards.
Ever heard of us?
The set is church. He is God. The script is Bible. And no heretics allowed.
I think this just might be my masterpiece.
The need to hire bilingual actors brought Michael Fassbender, Daniel Bruhl, Melanie Laurent, and Diane Kruger to the project, people with whom Quentin had never worked with before.
That sounds good.
Also, we can't forget Mike Myers' cameo, which he viewed as a nod of respect to his parents who fought on the British side in the Second World War.
Mostly my father spoke, and my mother spoke of the unbreakable brotherhood of those who serve. He remembered the name of every single British soldier he served with, and for every name, a hilarious story.
Lieutenant Archie Hickox, reporting south. General Ed Fennick, Eddie's Hickox.
Nor Rod Taylor, who became famous because of his role in Hitchcock's The Birds. By the way, it was Taylor's last role ever in the movies.
I saw Quentin direct, and it was the most exciting, exhilarating thing I've ever seen.
Then, Martine Wuttke was chosen to play Adolf Hitler, whose career had been filled with similar roles. Besides playing the Führer, he had played Joseph Goebbels twice.
Sie werden kein Wort darüber verlieren. Kein einziges Detail.
From there, the casting only got harder. First, though the role of Sergeant Donnie Donowitz had been written explicitly for him, Adam Sandler declined, preferring to star in the comedy Funny People. Oof. He was replaced by Eli Roth, who had previously been given a smaller role. The character of Babe Bukinski had to be removed altogether when Michael Madsen decided not to join the project. But the main problem was the search for the actor to play Hans Landa. Quentin needed an amazing actor who was fluent in English, French, German, and understood Italian. He auditioned hundreds of candidates, but no one fit the part. The director was distraught and thought that perhaps he had written a character that was impossible to play.
I literally had a moment where I didn't think I was going to find it. And I called the producers and said, look, if we can't find the right Landa, I'd rather just publish this script and do something else. And the producers, Lawrence and everybody, they were very cool about it. They didn't overreact. They go, well, then you know what? Here's the deal. Then we just spend, this week is just Landa, 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 Landa. And I can just tell you the day that Christoph came, walked in the room, sat down, and read 2 scenes. I remember thinking, and Lawrence was sitting right next to me, and go, we're making a movie.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Later, Waltz became the first actor to win an Oscar for a Tarantino film. He also became the second, but more on that later. Calabash Meerschaum. No, that's not the name of one of the bastards. It's the name of the type of pipe that Hans Landa smoked. It became popular thanks to another imaginary sleuth, Sherlock Holmes. And it was undoubtedly a reference to the amazing abilities of the Standartenführer.
So you're the Jew hunter. I'm a detective. A damn good detective.
Shooting for Inglourious Bastards began on the 9th of October 2008 and lasted 120 days.
Take 5. Humiliation. Take 1, Mark.
I am not dead. I just pretended. Now I'm gonna go after him and I'm gonna kick his fucking Nazi balls.
You guys were great! Let's do it one more time. Let's go. Why? Because we love making movies!
The most dangerous scene to shoot was the death of Brigitte von Hammerschmark. Tarantino never liked the way film depicts choking scenes, because you can always tell that the actors are faking it. He wanted more reality and convinced Diane Kruger to do the scene for real, since he feared that Christoph Waltz would either press too hard or not hard enough. He decided to do the stunt himself. The director was supposed to choke Diane until she started to gasp for breath. As soon as the correct facial expression appeared, Tarantino was supposed to yell cut. Thankfully, it only took one take. And though the actress was unconscious for a few seconds, she completely revived several minutes later. Also, this scene became the most subtle of the director's cameos, though he already appeared in the film as the first Nazi whose scalp the bastards collected. Inglourious Bastards premiered at the Cannes Film Festival on the 20th of May, 2009. Right before it was released, its running time was 180 minutes, and certain scenes look completely different. So Sally Menke, together with Tarantino, shorted the film by 30 minutes 2 days prior. Any person who has ever edited footage, especially shot on film, knows that it is an incredibly underrated achievement. The picture was a box office hit, making more than $300 million worldwide, and received 8 Oscar nominations. 15 years later, Quentin was considered again for the awards for Best Screenplay and Directing. The movie was also nominated for Best Picture, Cinematography, Film Editing, Sound Mixing, and Sound Editing. But the only one who celebrated a victory at the 82nd Academy Awards was the aforementioned Christoph Waltz.
There's no way I can ever thank you enough, but I can start right now. Thank you.
Later in 2010, Sally Menke, at the age of 56, died from heart stroke. Their relationship is difficult to describe in words. It was a real symbiosis. Tarantino believed that Sally's work on his films was the work of an equal partner.
We work very intensely together, and it's kind of amazing that we still like each other. If I was with my husband that long, I don't think I'd like him that much.
Quentin often said that she was the only person in the whole world capable of seeing the order in his chaotic vision, and called Menke his only full-fledged partner.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, Sally. Hello, Sally.
I think Sally's got that. Hi, Sally.
Hey, Sally, how's it going?
Sally, how are you? Good. A little lonely, are you? Mike says hello.
Hi, Sally. Cut. That was true. Sally. Hi, Sally.
All this time, we've avoided the subject of Quentin's personal life. Why? Not long ago, he gave journalists a perfect description of his stance on the subject.
I'm not saying that I'll never get married or have a kid before I turn 60, but I've made a choice so far to go on this road alone because this is my time to make movies.
But it's worth mentioning that over the years he had flings with Mira Sorvino, Sofia Coppola, Shar Jackson, and Julie Dreyfus. But he met his one and only in 2009, while on a promotion tour for Inglourious Bastards. In Israel, he met Daniela Peek, daughter of the famous musician Zvika Peek. 2 weeks later, they appeared on the red carpet in Los Angeles as a couple. But several months later, Peek and Tarantino parted ways. Not long after, in an interview, Quentin admitted that Daniela was the woman with which he could imagine his future. But right now, his career was more important. One might have thought that those were just nice words to placate his ex. But Tarantino wasn't lying. And in 2016, they renewed their relationship and got engaged. But as Tarantino says, while he's making movies, there will be no wedding. But let's return to 2009. The last stop on the promo tour for Inglourious Bastards was Japan, where after yet another press conference, he wandered into a local music store. While perusing the endless shelves, he stumbled upon a compilation of spaghetti western soundtracks.
He keeps alive with his car 45.
He just happened to be working on a book at the time devoted to the reviews and directing of Sergio Corbucci, creator of the movie The Con Artists, who rose to fame thanks to the spaghetti westerns like Django.
Django, have you never loved?
It was nothing short of a sign from the universe. He bought the CD, returned to his hotel room, scanned a few pages of his draft, turned it on, and spent the rest of the night writing the introduction to his next film.
Who's that stumbling around in the dark? State your business or prepare to get winged.
He spent the next 2 years working on Django Unchained. The final version was ready in May of 2011, and by November they had begun casting. It started off with Christoph Waltz rejecting the role written just for him. Dr. King Schultz, the similarity of the character to the actor himself deterred him, but Quentin insisted and said he just wouldn't take no for an answer. Christoph gave in, but on one condition. His character wouldn't do anything bad on screen. Quentin agreed by sending Waltz a handwritten note which read, of course, Mein Herr, Q.
Oh, very well.
From the beginning stages of the script, Tarantino had planned to invite Will Smith to play Django. He was the only candidate, but Smith declined. Later, he explained that he hadn't felt that the character was the lead role. He was more of a sidekick for Dr. Schultz. Otherwise, it would have been Django pulling the trigger in the final scene. Tarantino countered that in that case, the murder would have been nothing but revenge, whereas a white man killing a white man was foreshadowing the coming Civil War and end to slavery. And though Smith called the script brilliant, and not once, he never regretted his decision. After that, Terrence Howard, Idris Elba, Chris Tucker, Tyrese Gibson, and Michael K. Williams all tried out. But as soon as he met Jamie Foxx, he forgot about the others. When asked why he chose Jamie, Quentin said,
He was the cowboy. Forget the fact that he has his own horse. And that is actually his horse in the movie. He's from Texas. He understands.
Who's gonna let me pick up my own clothes? D-J-A-N-G-O. The D is silent.
Calvin Candy was also written with another actor in mind. Tarantino didn't name names, but he didn't hire that actor because he realized he was just too old for the role.
That's a problem I have. I'll be thinking about somebody and not take into account that I'm thinking of them from 20 years ago.
But according to rumor,
I love rumors.
the role was most likely reserved for John Travolta, though we're certain that no one was upset with Tarantino's final choice.
Well, then we got nothing more to talk about.
The only person there were no problems with was...
Yeah. Hello, my ass. Who this up on that nail?
After that, the project was joined by Kerry Washington, Jonah Hill, Bruce Dern, Walton Goggins, and many of Quentin's old friends. And of course, Quentin's cameo.
A little joint I'm off for you black box flavor.
And his other cameo.
So how about no bags this time? But next time, we do the bags right, and then we go full regalia.
While preparing for the role during a writing session, Christoph Waltz dislocated his pelvic bone.
Well, you know, the riding the horse wasn't that much of the challenge. The falling off was.
Quentin was afraid that he would have to delay shooting, but after rereading the script realized that he only had to change a few lines to move Schultz from the back of a horse to a carriage bench. In the end, it only added to the film.
Calm yourselves, gentlemen. I mean you no harm. I'm simply a fellow weary traveler.
The picture received a record-breaking budget for Quentin, $100 million. And on the 25th of January 2012, they started shooting.
Sun comes up and rises high. It's so hot, it's gonna make me cry. Oh Lord, oh
On the very first day, the director had to have an enlightening conversation with Jamie Foxx.
I'm reading my lines like, yeah, and he said, cut. Could I talk to you for a second? Close the door. What the fuck is that? I said, what you mean? Listen, all of this shit, you have to be a fucking slave. You come in with your fucking Louis bag and your fucking Range Rover and your fucking Jess. I'm so fucking, you're not Jim Brown. He's a fucking slave. And then he becomes the hero. But lose that shit. Door swings open, he walks out.
What's your name?
Django.
Leonardo DiCaprio, on the other hand, needed no enlightening. You can learn more about how his scenes went by watching his biography.
A lot of lies said around this dinner table here tonight, but that you can't believe.
Another interesting cameo was Franco Nero's, who played the lead role in the original Django.
What's your name?
Django. No one will hurt you anymore as long as you're with me.
Also, we can't forget a typical Tarantino film moment.
Where will we go now?
In the beginning, James Remar's character dies at the hands of Dr. Schultz. In the end, James Remar's other character kills Dr. Schultz. Shooting lasted for over 5 months, and the amount of footage filmed was mind-blowing. When the film's producer Harvey Weinstein first saw how much Tarantino had shot, he wanted him to take the proven route and split the movie in 2. But Quentin preferred to shorten the film almost by half. Scenes that didn't make the cut included the backstory of D'Artagnan's hunters, and some scenes with Zobel. Also, the dialogue between Steven and Django when they arrived at Candyland was before the scene where Schultz meets Broomhilda. This scene was Jamie Foxx's favorite one, which didn't make the final cut. But the biggest loss was a whole plot line where Kerry Washington's character was sold by a slave owner, played by Jonah Hill.
But nobody can see. So it'd be nice to see.
The actor had around 15 minutes of screen time, but Quentin wasn't pleased with the outcome, so he gave Hill a small role in the Ku Klux Klan and invited Sacha Baron Cohen to replace him. But the reshot episode was cut anyways.
Goddamn time wasting sons of bitches.
The editing dragged on for 4 months, mostly because Tarantino couldn't work as well as when he had Sally Menke by his side.
I've been really melancholy these last few days, because this is usually the time where she would kind of be running the show, this last little bit. So I'm particularly missing her now. I have to be more responsible for my own movie.
Menke's place was taken by Fred Rasky, who had previously worked as Sally's assistant on Kill Bill, and was the film editor for the first, The Fast and the Furious. During the first stage of writing the music for the picture, Quentin had a serious argument with Ennio Morricone, who was upset with how the director had used his compositions in the film. And vowed never to work with Tarantino again. However, 3 years later, he broke his vow, and for the first time in his career, at the age of 86, won an Oscar.
This is the first Oscar and 6th nomination for Ennio Morricone.
The premiere of Django Unchained was in New York on the 11th of December 2012. The events that followed can only be compared to the success of Pulp Fiction. The picture earned more than $424 million and became the most profitable of Quentin's career. It also attracted many accolades. Christoph Waltz, for his role as Dr. Schultz, received a Golden Globe, a BAFTA, and the aforementioned Oscar. Waltz set a record, by the way. His character has 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 17 seconds of screen time. This is the longest of any actor who received an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor.
Astonishing.
Quentin was also not forgotten. For the screenplay of Django, he received a Golden Globe, a BAFTA, a Caesar Award. In 18 years after Pulp Fiction, he took the Dolby Theater stage once again to receive his prize.
Thank you very much. I love this. I love the competition. You guys are all wonderful. Peace out.
The Chinese premiere closed out the promo tour for Django Unchained. Quentin returns to Austin, where he begins work on a new project. Despite convincing from the Weinstein brothers, he refused to make a Django sequel. But having fallen in love with the main character couldn't get him out of his head. So he decided to write a few stories and publish them in softcover. Some typical Pulp Fiction, so to speak.
So fucking funny. Every goddamn thing.
The first one he started writing was The Rugged Django in White Hell. But the further he got with the story, the more he realized that the character just didn't fit the narrative canvas. So Quentin changed the character and turned the short story into a screenplay.
Got room for one more?
By the end of the year, he had the first draft of a script on his hands entitled The Hateful Eight. It needed some serious work since usually Tarantino's final copy was always the fourth or fifth rewrite. But before doing the final edit, he wanted to make sure he had the support of 6 people with whom he wanted to make the movie. The names of 2 of them remain a mystery, but the others were Michael Madsen, Tim Roth, Bruce Dern, and the producer of Django, Reggie Hudlin. It was one of these men who was responsible for the leak, which led to the screenplay being published online.
If I don't hear a confession from one of you motherfuckers quick, fast, and in a hurry, I'm gonna pour this whole pot of coffee down that bitch's goddamn throat.
This was an unprecedented event for such a small circle of confidants. Quentin was furious. He gave an interview where he announced that he wouldn't be filming the movie. Later, believing that Reggie Hudlin was responsible for the leak, he filed a lawsuit against him. But if the director dumped the film, how did it end up being shot?
How so?
Yep, 6 months later, when Tarantino had cooled down, he decided to host an open reading in Los Angeles with the actors he had planned to hire. The event had 1,200 people in the audience, who on average had paid $200 for a ticket. They were not disappointed. In the end, the audience gave a standing ovation, and the actors began to convince Tarantino to film it after all. Quentin was so touched that right then and there, he declared that his 8th film would be Hateful Eight.
I fucking knew it!
The cast was mostly made up of Tarantino's friends for whom he had written the roles.
You're writing your life story.
You bet I am.
Am I in it?
You just entered.
The choice of Kurt Russell for the role of John Ruth the Hangman was an interesting one. Tarantino mentioned several times that Hateful Eight only referenced 2 films, Reservoir Dogs and The Thing.
There's a storm hitting us in 6 hours. We're gonna find out who's who.
And Kurt Russell was the lead role in the second. The rest of the connections are easy to follow. The heroes don't trust each other while being trapped in a closed space because of a snowstorm. Russell's character is paranoid and disarms the rest of the characters.
Put those torches on the floor and back off.
Like I said, nothing personal, just a precaution.
And of course, Ennio Morricone, who composed the music for both films. By the way, because he was pressed for time, he had to give Tarantino unused music which he had written for The Thing, but which had been gathering dust on the shelf for more than 30 years.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I'm just happy to have a front row seat.
Not counting a few small roles in Demian Bashir and Channing Tatum, the main role of casting was to find an actress for the role of Daisy Domergue.
You don't know nothing about this fella here.
Nope.
Don't even know her name.
Nope.
Rumors tied the role to Jennifer Lawrence and Uma Thurman. But Quentin did as he had often done in his career. He chose an actress whose glory days seemed to have passed.
Hey, little apple blossom.
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
A lot of times this town or this business really only looks at your last 3 projects. Quentin is the exception to that. He looks at your whole body of work. He would talk to me about moments I had in flesh and blood, as though they were yesterday.
Hush, soldier. Don't tell them. I beg of you.
He's that thorough, and that's just how his brain works. When he looks at you, he doesn't see just what you did the last 2 years.
It's symbolic that a few months before casting, Jennifer had attended the reading of the script as an audience member.
That's why this chapter is called
Domergue's got a secret.
Before filming began, Quentin insisted that the movie be filmed on some incredibly rare equipment. They used cameras and lenses which had been used to film Ben-Hur. The exact lenses. They were restored and tested over 6 months to make sure they were ready to be used in extremely cold temperatures. Hateful Eight became the 11th film in the history of cinematography to be filmed in Ultra Panavision, which has an aspect ratio of 2.76 to 1.
Ultra Panavision. When you absolutely positively got to wow everyone in the room, except no substitutes.
On the 8th of December 2014 at a ranch near Telluride, Colorado, they began filming Hateful Eight.
Considering there's a blizzard going on. Whole lot of fellas walking around, wouldn't you say, Major?
Without leaving Colorado, the film crew shot the exterior of the haberdashery and the panoramic views of the San Miguel Mountains, while the rest of the 3.5 months of filming were done in a pavilion in Los Angeles, outfitted so that the temperature inside was never above 35 degrees.
You okay, O.B.?
I'm fine. I'll be fine. I just need to get warm.
When guitarists hear the story connected to a scene shot in one long take, where Daisy Domergue performs the song Jim Jones at Botany Bay.
For life, Jim Jones, I sentence you across the stormy sea.
Their blood runs cold. Jennifer was playing on a priceless antique 1870 Martin, on loan from the Martin Museum. There were a few copies at the set, but
You're never going to cut a scene until Quentin says cut. And Kurt thought it must be a dummy guitar. I don't think Quentin knew that it was the vintage instrument either. The scene was going exactly the way he wanted it to go. And he wanted to play one scene in the movie in real time without a cut, in one long take.
Music time's over.
Kurt felt terrible. He had no idea. When he found out, his eyes literally welled up.
this explains Daisy's frantic reaction, since this moment was captured in the final version of the picture. And though the insurance covered the cost of the damage, representatives of the Martin Museum said they would never again allow one of their guitars to be used for a film.
No! Yeah! Shut up!
The last scenes were filmed on the 5th of April 2015, after which Quentin spent 6 months working on editing the picture. Simultaneously, the Weinstein Company began preparing for the release of the widest formatted film that had been released in the last 60 years. They searched for, bought, and restored 70mm projectors in 100 cinemas across the country, and invested $10 million in the process. This was a move unheard of in the prime of the IMAX era. The premiere was planned for the 25th of December. 4 days before that, Tarantino got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and everything seemed to be going great.
He's all about making films that make you happy, because we went to the movies to be happy.
The first showing of The Hateful Eight was supposed to be at the legendary Los Angeles Cinerama Dome. It was one of the few theaters in the whole world equipped for this type of film, and had a deep symbolic meaning for Quentin, who had been going to it since he was a child. But then...
Basically, and I'm not talking about the whole country, but I'm talking about one theater in particular.
Oh, you sound nervous about this.
Well, that's a big fucking deal.
All right, go ahead.
We were going to play at the Cinerama Dome on the 25th. We were going to open there and play there exclusively for 2 weeks. And Star Wars was going to play the 2 weeks before us. And I grew up in Los Angeles, so I think of the Cinerama Dome as a real big deal and imagine seeing it at the Cinerama Dome.
Means something to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Disney, who owns Star Wars, decided, well, you know what? Maybe we want to play throughout the entire holiday season. We're going to go to the Cinerama Dome and say that they can't honor their contract with us to show The Hateful Eight. And the ArcLight people that own the Cinerama Dome said, no, you can't do that. We have a deal. As of yesterday, Disney came to the ArcLight people and said, no,
Wow.
You are going to play Star Wars in the Cinerama Dome for the entire holiday season. And if you don't, if you honor your deal with the Hateful Eight, we will not allow you to have Star Wars, the biggest movie in the world. We will not allow you to show it at any of your ARC-like movie theaters.
Oh.
They are going out of their way to fuck me.
Quentin, in all fairness, I must say there's nobody from Disney here to refute that or to say.
No,
that,
but as far as
I understand how you feel.
As far as I'm concerned, then let all the entertainment reporters call up Disney as of now and ask for their comments about their extortionist practices.
Listen, Bob, I'm talking to Bob Iger. I don't give a shit about this theater. Quentin's a weirdo. Sorry, Quentin. The fucking kid, they got the stupid 70 millimeter. They got all that shit that he cares about. He just wants to show his goddamn movie there. You're sitting on top of the world. You got Star Wars. What do you need this? Do me a favor, Bobby, for me. And you know, we've had many private conversations. I fucking partied with this guy over at Jimmy Kimmel's. Be a gracious man. I want Quentin to show this new movie. He's worked his ass off. He wants the equipment. Hateful Eight. Would you do it for me? All right? Christmas. It's Christmas, for Christ's sake.
In the full version of this interview, Quentin was so touched by Stern's help that he teared up.
You're moved to tears over this.
No, that's very touching, man. I really appreciate it.
But the story didn't have a Disney happy ending. Bob Iger didn't budge, and the premiere at the Cinerama Dome was bumped to 2 weeks later. Tarantino was enraged. He promised he would never ever work with the company ever again, which had made quite a lot of money from Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill since Disney owned Miramax.
They fucked me over, and I made them a lot of money for Pulp Fiction. And that really is a bad way to treat a former employee who has worked very well for them.
Yes, many may think it's not a big deal, but for a person who treasures details and devoted his whole life to film, it was a big deal, which is why the conflict got so much attention. Unfortunately, that was not the last hit Quentin received. The close circle which had leaked the script came full circle when a few days before the premiere the film was uploaded to the internet.
No one said the job was supposed to be easy.
No one said it's supposed to be that hard, neither.
So the movie going up against Star Wars, The Revenant, and Joy made a heroic effort when it collected $160 million worldwide. Nonetheless, it was considered a failure. 2 months later, at the Academy Awards, the picture was only nominated in 3 categories: Best Cinematography, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Soundtrack.
Grazie.
After the promo tour for Hateful Eight ended, Quentin began developing an idea that had been at the front of his mind for the last 8 years. The movie would tell of Los Angeles in the 70s.
I've been working on this script for 5 years, as well as living in Los Angeles County most of my life, including in 1969, when I was 6 years old. I'm very excited to tell this story of an LA and a Hollywood that doesn't exist anymore.
Quentin Tarantino never rushed back into the director's chair, but rather wrote for pleasure and carefully prepared for new projects.
100%.
For decades in his free time, the author would jot ideas down for a future novel, which he never planned on publishing. It was a simple story he used to exercise his style, and at the same time tell the story of Los Angeles in the late 1960s. A carefree time in Quentin's youth, yet packed with events for Hollywood. The text sparkled with hundreds of references to famous personalities working in that dream world, and created a world filled with homages and quotes.
The fuck are you talking about?
Hundreds of pages of random notes with unconnected scenes turned into the script of his 9th film while shooting Inglourious Bastards.
I was part of Operation Kino from the very beginning as a double agent.
One of the members of the star-studded cast who Quentin wished to remain anonymous asked him to hire his stunt double. They had worked together for 20 years. Despite the fact that the stunt didn't require a double, the director agreed, and when he saw the pair on set, he realized that this was probably their last job together.
They probably once looked so close to each other, you could do a close-up on the stuntman. But that was not the case anymore.
Quentin was amazed by the sadness and melancholy of the duet. The unavoidable finale of their relationship inspired him to create the main characters for his future film about Hollywood. In the 60s, these people were basking in fame. The public considered them to be the stars of cinema and television. And they had no idea that in a few years, they would be replaced with hundreds of talented, ungroomed, bearded men who would exchange horses and whiskey for motorcycles and marijuana. This is how the main idea for his future movie appeared. That breaking point in the history of American cinematography. The waning of the golden era. The revolution of film schools in the apogee of that period. The terrible murder of Sharon Tate by the Manson family.
In California, 5 members of a so-called religious cult, including Charles Manson, the guru or high priest, have been indicted in the murder of Sharon Tate and 6 others.
When Quentin finished developing their characters, the duet and their backstory seemed so interesting to him that he was considering filming them without a plot. They were remarkable people whose routine would entertain the viewer even without the typical twists and turns. So in 2016, after the promo tour of Hateful Eight and a few award ceremonies, Tarantino seriously started casting for his next picture. At the same time, his longtime friend Harvey Weinstein found himself at the center of the biggest sex scandal in the USA.
Harvey, are you sorry?
The lawsuits continued till the 11th of March 2020, when Harvey was found guilty and sentenced to 23 years in prison. Despite the moral aspect and societal resonance, the event affected the typical methods of Quentin's filmmaking. Every picture made by Tarantino had been produced by Harvey's studio, but because of the scandal, the director had to find new investors.
Why should that surprise anybody? When the hell has America, ever been fair? We might be right every once in a while, but we're very rarely fair.
Several studios bid for the project, including Warner Brothers, Paramount, and Sony. The last studio provided the best conditions. And it wasn't just the $95 million budget. Complete artistic freedom, control over final edits, or the 20% share of the clean profit. The main point of the contract stated that 20 years after its release, Quentin would receive the rights to the picture. It was these unprecedented conditions that allowed Quentin to bring to life risky ambitions. Besides this, the director chose Sony in part because of their previous partnership. In 2012, the studio received the rights to the international release of Django Unchained, and thanks to its involvement, the movie became the most profitable of Tarantino's career. This step also made their relationship come full circle. Quentin returned to Sony after 20 years had passed since they had declared his script too violent and refused to invest in Pulp Fiction.
They look like a couple of dorks.
Weinstein's shoes were filled by David Heyman, who worked on the Harry Potter franchise. And though David had dozens of successful projects under his belt, he said that his time working with Quentin was one of the best periods of his career.
It was about as much fun as I've ever had on any movie in my life. The crew was his family.
But let's get back to casting. The director dreamed of snaring Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt from the first drafts of the script. Quentin had often called this duo the greatest stars of our time, and didn't believe that he would be able to convince both of them to play. Because of this, from the very early production stages, the project was associated with Tom Cruise, who had a shot at playing Cliff Booth.
Fair enough.
Luckily, both Leo and Brad agreed to unite with Tarantino, and even agreed to considerable financial sacrifices, cutting their usual salaries to $10 million. After signing the contract, Quentin dubbed the duet the new Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Their charisma strongly brought to mind the Western Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Who are those guys?
A few years later, the actors would be extremely complimentary of each other and promised that they would work together on screen again.
Well, I just figured we would. I got a six-pack in the back, thought we'd order pizza. All right.
The trio of main characters was completed by Margot Robbie, who played Sharon Tate. When Quentin had chosen the actors for the main roles, he invited them to his house and had a reading of the script. There was only one copy of the text which never left his house. After his first version of Hateful Eight had been stolen, Tarantino became seriously paranoid about another leak and kept all the details of his project secret. And there were a lot of details. Margot Robbie's character was based on the real Sharon Tate. but the prototypes of Rick and Cliff were not so obvious.
Goddamn right.
Dalton embodies a generation of stars from Wild West TV series, which became spaghetti westerns.
You ever seen an Italian Western? Huh? They're awful. It's a fucking fart.
I don't think it's nice you laughing.
Rick is loosely associated with Ty Hardin, who Quentin called a poor copy of Steve McQueen.
Afraid there's some folks who wouldn't quite agree with you.
Ralph Meeker and Pete Duell. Duell, like Dalton, was the star of a TV Western who had a drinking problem. Lost his license as the result of a drunk driving accident.
Rick got his driver's license taken away for too many drunk driving tickets.
And whose stunt double was Pete's part-time chauffeur.
Cliff drives him everywhere now.
Booth is a mixture of Gary Kent, who had shot at Spahn Ranch before the Manson family had settled there, and Gene LaBelle, who landed a role in the series The Green Hornet after the other stuntmen refused to work with Bruce Lee because of the constant beatings. In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the martial arts star was played by Mike Moe, and the scene itself caused mixed reactions. Lee's family criticized the portrayal, while the Chinese government required that the scene be deleted in order for the movie to be released in the People's Republic. But Tarantino refused to censor it. In fact, the scene is based on a historical undertone. LaBelle was called in to calm Lee down, who used to provoke the stuntman, and defended his actions by saying it made the scenes more beautiful.
Come on, man. You don't believe that old shit, do you?
Using wrestling moves, Gene overcame Lee in a fight. Later, Gene befriended Bruce, and over the course of a year would show him how to resist similar holds. They incorporated the resulting moves into Lee's fighting style. The result of their training sessions can be seen in the fight with Chuck Norris in The Way of the Dragon, and with the young Sammo Hung in Enter the Dragon. LaBelle became Bruce's favorite stuntman because he never complained about the ferocity of the hits. This reference doesn't sully the memory of Kung Fu legends, but reminds us that we are all ordinary people and that conflicts often lead to mutual respect. The relationship between the main characters, however, is an homage to the friendship of Burt Reynolds and his stunt double Hal Needham, who lived in the actor's guest house for 12 years and later became the highest paid stuntman in Hollywood. And the TV series which brought fame to Rick Dalton is based on Wanted Dead or Alive, where the main character is played by Steve McQueen.
Bounty Law. Starring Rick Dalton.
It was because of this comparison that DiCaprio almost got a role in The Great Escape.
Never had a chance.
10 days isolation hills.
Captain Hill.
McQueen's name also made it into the list of celebrities who were supposed to be killed by Charles Manson. On the 8th of August, 1969, Steve almost went to Sharon Tate's house, but had a change of plan at the last minute. McQueen also makes an appearance in Tarantino's film and was played by Damian Lewis. The aforementioned Burt Reynolds was portrayed by James Marsden.
Would you take a bite of a red apple?
Oh, you bet I would.
But the scene was cut because of the unexpected death of Reynolds. The actor died on the 6th of September, 2018, a few weeks before Quentin's movie began shooting. Burt had been diligently preparing for filming and even helped to tweak the screenplay. The line about Cliff's appearance was a hint from Reynolds.
You know, you're kind of pretty for a stuntman.
That's what they tell me.
Brad didn't like the idea of mentioning the handsomeness of his character, but believed that Burt knew the Hollywood of that time too well to argue with him. Because of the tragic event, Reynolds was replaced with Bruce Dern, whom Quentin had worked with in Hateful Eight. The role of Marvin Schwartz, which was based on a popular producer of westerns who worked with Burt Reynolds, was written by Quentin exclusively for Al Pacino.
Ping, pow, zoom, zoom.
By the way, Schwartz's love for the 14 Fifths of McCluskey was a reference to The Godfather, where a policeman of the same last name breaks Michael Corleone's jaw.
Take a hold of him. Stand him up. Stand him up straight.
Of course, one could talk about the references in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for almost longer than it takes to watch the film. But let's return to 2018. While he was choosing actors, Quentin was also choosing a team that would be able to bring to life his childhood memories of Los Angeles. The man who was responsible for the camera was his irreplaceable companion, Robert Richardson, who has been working with Tarantino for more than 15 years. The production design, however, Quentin entrusted to a new person to his team, a fellow LA local.
What was great is how much Quentin and I both saw the same things.
What's good is that I'm older than Quentin, so when he'd say, "Remember this?" I'd go, "No, that wasn't on that street. That was over on Westwood." And he'd go, "Oh, yeah. I had a much better memory because he was like 8 or something, and I was 17.
Barbara Ling had risen to fame thanks to her partnership with Joel Schumacher. And 27 years before Quentin's proposal, she and Robert Richardson had immersed themselves in the 60s when working on Oliver Stone's The Doors.
If I was to say to you, girl, I couldn't get much higher.
Working with Tarantino allowed her to recreate the city of her youth. You can feel the attention to detail in every scene, beginning with the fonts, advertisements, and posters, and ending with the architecture. Barbara restored the facades of dozens of theaters.
The full original look, the original neon, the exact movie of that date is actually what's on the marquee that was playing there.
Another obstacle was convincing the shop owners on Hollywood Boulevard, who didn't want to change the appearance of their facades.
If you do a Hollywood Boulevard closure, you have to have pretty much 100% of the merchants on board.
However, after shooting, the owners left the historical restorations that Barbara had created. But Quentin's favorite location was Spawn Ranch.
One of the best sets I ever had of any of my movies was rebuilding the Spawn Ranch. And we did a wonderful job casting those gals. It's scary, and it is creepy. We're not doing anything to make anything scary or creepy. It just is. It's a wonderful alchemy we captured, and I didn't break the mood.
This scene showed Quentin's ability to incorporate classic film achievements into his movies. The famous scene depicting the attack of a village in Apocalypse Now is edited so that after the helicopters appear, they appear in every scene after, at least in the background. Tarantino uses this same move at the Spawn Ranch, although instead of Hueys, there are dogs running around in the background. Also, the barking never stops for a second. Besides this, some of the decorations are allusions to Quentin's previous films. The wall at the airport is identical to the one at the beginning of Jackie Brown. And the town used in the TV show Bounty Law is the same street used in Django Unchained. The opening scenes of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are full of Tarantino's beloved allusions. While he was searching for a location, the director visited the house of Lee Van Cleef, who had a gigantic portrait of himself hanging in his garage. This design element both intrigued and unsettled Tarantino, and he immediately added a similar element to the parking lot at Rick's house. By the way, Van Cleef is a star from films directed by Sergio Leone, whom Tarantino believes to be the best maker of spaghetti westerns in history. It was Leone's work which gave him the idea for the film's title.
I've seen enough, all right? Nobody likes spaghetti westerns.
Dalton's Cadillac belongs to Michael Madsen. He had also ridden in it during Reservoir Dogs, but this time the car got more screen time than him. Madsen got a role thanks to a joke. On the set of Hateful Eight, Madsen commented that in each of their movies, his character always dies. To counter, Quentin incorporated Michael into an episode of Bounty Law, where the actor finally stayed alive.
Well, you know, most people just ain't partial, seeing dead bodies.
The beginning of the picture shows Sharon Tate with Roman Polanski. Tarantino admitted that he didn't contact Polanski, but limited himself to Sharon's sister Deborah. In the early stages, he shared the script with her and got advice about how to portray the actress. Deborah also brought Sharon's jewelry to the set, which Margot wears to the party. After the film was released, Some of the viewers were disappointed that one of the main characters of the story had so few lines and less than 5 minutes of screen time. Tarantino explained that he had shown everything exactly as he had planned, and was even irritated with the people who thought that a character's importance to the plot had anything to do with the number of lines in the script. Tate's appearance was a moment of light and happiness in life. One of the most key moments is when Margot Robbie, playing Tate, watches footage of the real Sharon on screen, and the viewer is watching her watching Sharon. 3 levels demonstrating the magic of film.
I think it's a magical scene. I don't mean because I'm a magician. I mean, I think the ladies in this make it magical.
But let's get back to the set, where the scope of Tarantino's ideas was wowing the producers. The director avoided computer graphics, and even Cliff's trips didn't have any CGI. The highways were filled with retro cars and were closed off for 4 hours at a time. No one in Hollywood had done that in the last decade. Quentin's enthusiasm was contagious when led to the car manager Stephen Butcher to get access to a Ford Galaxy, which was used by the members of the Manson family and enabled him to create an exact copy. Another car which Butcher was lucky enough to find was an army truck from the TV show The FBI. Stephen found the exact model used in the episode All the Streets Are Silent from 40 years ago. He washed it, gave it a new paint job, and brought it to the film crew. By the way, the movie used the real opening titles of the show, where they added Leo in.
With guest stars James Ferrantino, Rick Dalton.
In the original episode, the villain was played by Burt Reynolds. Robert Richardson said that the highlight of his career was filming the scene in the restaurant where he captured DiCaprio, Pitt, and Pacino in one frame. During this conversation, there are a few flashbacks, including the song Green Door, which was only Leonardo's 3rd attempt at singing in front of the camera.
Pull the mask off the old Lone Ranger and you don't mess around with Jim.
My flying machine and it's up she goes, up she goes.
Also, Leonardo's genuine reaction to the flamethrower.
All right, that's too hot. Anything we can do about that heat?
Rick, it's a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Another improvisation was Cliff Booth's phrase.
You're Rick fucking Dalton. Don't you forget it.
A phrase which Pitt himself heard at the dawn of his own career. In the mid-90s, the actor had a tag-along acquaintance whom Brad would characterize as your average freeloader. He was of absolutely no use except for the fact that when Pitt would start to complain about the setbacks in his career, the guy would say to him,
"Hey man, don't forget, you're Brad fucking Pitt." And you know what? It soothed me. It soothed me.
This scene was based on the pilot episode of Lancer, and besides Dalton, all the characters were from there.
Long time, Johnny Madrid.
Yeah, long time.
Care for a drink?
Yeah, sure.
After you, I think I have to.
Sam Wanamaker was portrayed by Nicholas Hammond, who had begun his career in the 60s.
I'm Friedrich. I'm 14. I'm impossible.
Absolutely fantastic. I loved it.
While the main heroes of the show, Johnny Madrid and Scott Lancer, were played by Timothy Oliphant and Luke Perry.
My valise, please. Good man.
On set, DiCaprio spent a few hours with Luke talking about the Hollywood of his childhood. In the 90s, DiCaprio believed that Perry was the modern-day James Dean and the biggest star of television.
Okay.
Unfortunately, on the 4th of March 2019, Luke died from a stroke. The depiction of Lancer would become his last appearance on screen. In a tragic coincidence, 4 months before that, Wayne Maunder passed away, the actor who played Lancer in the original television show. There are more allusions to Quentin's films among the characters. The married stunt coordinators played by Zoe Bell and Kurt Russell hint at Death Proof, where Bell played herself.
Agility, reflexes, nimbleness. There's few human beings that can fuck with Zoe on that front.
Oh, Kim, I like you too.
Since before that, she had become famous as Uma Thurman's double in the Kill Bill trilogy. And Kurt played stuntman Mike.
I've been running so long that my feet
Another reference is the girl who sells Cliff, the special cigarette. More than 10 years ago, Pearl Haney Jardine played Bibi in Kill Bill Volume 2.
Freeze, Mommy.
Bang, bang. Oh.
Each character is important in the narrative, but Charles Manson and his family were unusual antagonists. They were pure evil personified. Damon Herriman played the head of the popular Hollywood sect twice that year, playing in Tarantino's film and also in David Fincher's TV show.
Let's talk about August 9th, 1969.
That is gone in the past, and when it is gone, brother.
He only appeared for a few minutes in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Another scene with Charlie was left on the editing table.
Oh, gosh dang it.
Well, we can't talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood without mentioning the finale. There are many spoilers ahead, so continue watching only if you've seen the film.
Why not?
The culmination begins with the appearance of the foursome from the Manson family. In Quentin's interpretation, Mia Hawke's character gets cold feet and runs away, although in real life Linda Kasabian stays in the car. Later, her testimony helped to convict Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Susan Atkins in court.
All were found guilty of murder in the first degree.
Tex introduces himself to Cliff using the phrase which he said when he entered Tate's home.
I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business.
What unfolds next is possibly the goriest scene in all of Tarantino's filmography. For a director having a track record like he does, that's saying something. Sadie, by the way, the character for which Tarantino reserved with the worst death, was the most bloodthirsty member of the sect. When the characters finish with the Manson followers, music from the western The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean comes on. This is worth noting because at the beginning of that film appear the words, "Maybe this isn't the way it was, it's the way it should have been." Once again, Tarantino used the finale to rewrite history. Last time he eradicated the Nazis, and this time he not only saved the lives of Sharon and her friends, but also the era of peace and love. The violence of the Manson family put an end to the trends of long hair and going barefoot. After the lawsuit against the murderers, no one wanted to look like a hippie.
Today, the magic is gone. Aimless and disorganized, the hippies have fallen prey to their own free spirit. Free love, free drugs, and too much free publicity have gradually corrupted them.
So instead of the usual story based on real events, where the viewer is filled with grief at the looming ending, Quentin got even with the villains. He got his revenge on the violent killings and terror which fettered Hollywood and brought an end to a happy, carefree childhood.
Is everybody okay?
Well, the fucking hippies aren't. That's for goddamn sure. Yeah.
Tarantino finished filming his magnum opus on the 1st of November 2018. But before he could start editing, he got married to Daniela Peake. They had a simple ceremony in Beverly Hills, and later a banquet for their closest friends. By the way, Daniela has a cameo in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, playing Rick's co-star while he's working in Italy. The first version of the film, edited by Fred Raskin, was over 4 hours long, but Quentin wanted a dynamic film, so over the next year he cut the time in 2. Hundreds of minutes were left on the editing table, and several characters were removed altogether. That's why the premiere did not include the appearances of Danny Strong, the aforementioned James Marston, or Tim Roth on screen. Die-hard fans harbor the hope that one day they will see all the deleted scenes, since Quentin promised to release the full version of the picture a year or two after the initial release in movie theaters. So far, it's unclear whether it will be in the form of a miniseries or the longest full-feature film in 50 years.
I hope so.
The premiere of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood occurred on the 22nd of July, 2019. Over the next 3 months, the picture made over $300 million at the box office, the second most profitable in Quentin's career after Django Unchained.
It was a pleasure doing business with y'all.
Then, in the beginning of 2020, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood received 10 Oscar nominations. And though yes, the main victory at the Academy Awards went to Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, Quentin's film won a statuette for Best Production Design and Decorations.
This is the first Oscar and nomination for Barbara Ling, the second Oscar and 8th nomination for Nancy Haig.
That evening, Brad Pitt also celebrated as he received the first Oscar of his career.
I think it's time we give a little love to our stunt coordinators and our stunt crews.
It's interesting that Pitt celebrated the victory in the Best Supporting Actor category, despite the fact that he spent no less time on screen than DiCaprio.
Talking about? You're my stunt double. Come on now. Shit.
And while the main prize seemed to be taken out from Quentin's nose, his sadness didn't last long. Certainly not longer than 2 weeks. On the 22nd of February, the director received a much more important prize. In Tel Aviv, Daniela bore him a son. The boy was called Leo. In honor of Daniela's grandfather, not the actor who played Rick Dalton. Fatherhood is a new era in the life of the director and will definitely affect his future art. The director continues to insist that his 10th film will be his final one.
And I think that 10th movie would be smaller and a little bit more epilogue.
So all we can do now is continue to enjoy his fresh articles on the New Beverly website and hope for a director's cut of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But is that so bad? In Tarantino's case, the waiting was always worth it. Plus, now we have the opportunity to rewatch his films another 100 times.
I got the cock-doodle devil in my left hand. I got the balls of the Lord in my right hand. In my teeth I got the clip for the mother of man. I eat the soul with a spoon in a star the land. I've been a while, all down with dirt, a brain washed. In my soul, a hearse up in gas, with the new air up in gas, with the new air.
So bring home a 6-pack of Southern hospitality. Bring home a 6-pack of old Chattanooga beer.
Snake in a fist fight, and there ain't nothing that I done have felt so right. I've been slow-mo to romance. I flipped my hat and then I told my pants.
Take a bite and feel all right.
All right, this cigarette tastes like fucking shit. And by the way, who chose this photo, all right? I have a double chin, all right? Nobody notices that crap.
All down with dirt, a brain of walls. In my soul, a hearse up in gas. With the new air up in gas. With the new air. Been a while, all down with dirt.